The night my own son told me to stay quiet because I would only embarrass the family. I thought that was the deepest humiliation I could endure. Then the CEO of his billion-dollar company walked onto the stage, looked straight across the ballroom, and said, "Everything that makes this company worth working for began with one woman who never asked for credit." A spotlight found me before I could even stand. My son's smile disappeared. My daughter-in-law turned pale, and in that moment, everyone finally learned the truth they had laughed at for years. If this story touches your heart, I'd truly appreciate it if you gave it a like. Subscribe if you enjoy heartfelt family stories about resilience, dignity, and second chances. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read as many of your comments as I can, and they always remind me that none of us are ever truly alone. My name is Ethan Pierce, and for most of my life I believed a mother's work was supposed to be invisible. Not worthless, not small. Just invisible. You cook the meals, remember the birthdays, fold the shirts, sit beside hospital beds, calm the storms. No one else even notices, and somehow if you do it well enough, everyone begins to believe the peace in the house simply appeared on its own. That was how it happened in my family. By the time I turned 68, my son Michael had become the kind of man people stood up straighter around. He wore tailored navy suits, drove a silver Mercedes, and spoke in polished phrases like talent retention. By the time I turned 68, my son Michael had become the kind of man people stood up straighter around. He wore tailored navy suits, drove a silver Mercedes, and spoke in polished phrases like talent retention, executive alignment, and organizational performance. His name appeared in business magazines around Chicago. His photo was on the company website beside a title that sounded too important to fit inside the mouth of the little boy I once raised Chief People Officer. I was proud of him. That was the part nobody understood. Even when he corrected me in front of others, even when he sighed before I finished a sentence, even when he looked at me with that tired smile grown children use when they think their parents are becoming embarrassing, I was still proud. A mother can be wounded by her child and still remember the weight of him sleeping against her shoulder. Michael had not been born into ease. His father, Robert, worked as a maintenance supervisor at a small hospital outside Springfield, Illinois. I worked in administration for a regional manufacturing company called Whitaker Foods, where I spent nearly 30 years doing the kind of work nobody claps for, but everyone depends on. I handled employee records, training schedules, conflict complaints, holiday rotations, new hire orientations, and more often than anyone admitted the quiet human disasters that happened between official job descriptions. When a young woman came in crying because her supervisor kept changing her schedule after she arranged childcare, she came to my desk. When an older man was afraid to report a safety concern because he needed the job to pay for his wife's medication, he came to my desk. When two departments stopped speaking after one manager humiliated another in front of a client, somehow they ended up sitting across from me in the break room with paper cups of coffee between us. I was never an executive. I never had a corner office. I never made decisions about profit margins or acquisitions. But I learned people. I learned what makes them stay, what makes them leave, what makes them give their best, and what slowly kills the spirit inside them while they keep showing up every Monday morning. Michael used to know that. When he was young, he would sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I prepared orientation packets for new employees. He would ask why I wrote notes by hand on welcome cards. "Because people remember how you made them feel on their first day," I told him once. He was 10 then. He nodded as if I had handed him a secret. Years later, that same boy became a man who looked at me over the rim of his wine glass and said, "Mom, business has changed. You can't run a modern company on kindness." It happened on a Sunday evening at his house in Naperville. Michael and his wife Lauren lived in one of those large homes with tall windows, white stone counters, and furniture so expensive it looked uncomfortable on purpose. Lauren was beautiful in a sharp, careful way. Every room in her house seemed arranged to prove something. The candles matched the season. The throw pillows looked untouched. Even the fruit bowl on the kitchen island seemed decorative rather than edible. I had brought a peach cobbler that evening because Michael used to love it when he was young. Lauren accepted it with both hands and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, Ethan, you didn't have to bring anything," she said. "We're trying to keep dessert light these days." I should have taken the hint, but I set the cobbler on the counter anyway and said Michael always liked it warm with vanilla ice cream. Lauren glanced toward him. "Well, Michael also used to eat gas station hot dogs, so thankfully tastes evolve." Michael laughed. Not cruelly, maybe, but carelessly. Sometimes careless laughter cuts deeper than deliberate insult because it proves the person didn't even stop to consider your heart was there. Their daughter, Emily, came downstairs a moment later and gave me the kind of hug that reminded me I still had a place somewhere in that house. She was 21, soft-spoken, and observant in a way that made adults underestimate her. She was home from college for the summer and had recently started an internship at Michael's company, Halberg Systems, a fast-growing technology firm that designed software for healthcare networks. "Grandma, Ethan," she whispered into my ear, "I'm glad you came." That was Emily. She always noticed when someone needed to hear they mattered. Dinner began politely enough. Lauren served grilled salmon quinoa salad and roasted asparagus on matte black plates. Michael talked about the company. He always talked about the company. That night, he was complaining about employee turnover. "We lost 2 senior engineers this week," he said, cutting into his salmon harder than necessary. "Both went to smaller companies for less money." "Makes no sense." Lauren shook her head. "People are impossible now. They want praise for doing the job they're paid to do." Michael leaned back. "Exactly. We offer competitive salaries, excellent benefits, stock options, remote flexibility, and still they say they don't feel valued. What does that even mean?" I kept my eyes on my plate at first. I had learned that offering advice in Michael's house was like stepping onto thin ice. You never knew which word would crack beneath you. But then I thought of all the faces I had seen over the years. People who had left good pay because they were tired of being ignored. People who had stayed through hard seasons because one manager remembered their child's surgery or defended them in a meeting. People who gave loyalty not to companies, but to the people who made them feel human inside those companies. So I spoke gently. "It usually means they don't feel seen," I said. Michael looked at me. Lauren's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I tried to smile. "Money matters, of course. Benefits matter. But people don't only leave jobs. Sometimes they leave the way a place makes them feel about themselves." Michael exhaled through his nose. "Mom, just one word." But there it was, the warning. I should have stopped, but some truths rise up in you like water behind a dam. When people believe their work matters, they carry more than their job description. I continued. They protect the place. They help the new ones. They tell the truth before a small problem becomes a large one. Lauren set her fork down. "That's sweet, Ethan. It really is. But Michael is managing a company with thousands of employees. This isn't a church potluck committee." Emily looked down quickly, hiding something in her expression. Michael rubbed his temple. "Mom, I know you mean well, but old workplace ideas don't apply the same way anymore. Everything is data now. Metrics, systems, scalable solutions." I nodded as if I understood. Though what I understood most clearly was that my son had found new words to dismiss old wisdom. "I worked with systems too," I said quietly. Michael's face softened for half a second, then tightened again. "You worked in admin." There was no shouting, no slammed fist, no dramatic cruelty. Just 5 words placed neatly on the table like a closed door. "You worked in admin, not leadership, not strategy, not anything worth listening to." I felt something inside me shrink, but I kept my hands folded in my lap. Lauren lifted her wine glass. Honestly, I think it's wonderful that you had your experience. But Michael's world is very different. His world, as if I had raised him from outside it. As if the hands that packed his lunches paid for his school supplies, sat through his fevers and typed reports, late through his fevers and typed reports late at night after he fell asleep, had belonged to someone from another century. Emily broke the silence. I think Grandma has a point, she said softly. Michael turned to her. You've been an intern for 3 weeks. At night, after he fell asleep, had belonged to someone from another century. Emily broke the silence. I think Grandma has a point, she said softly. Michael turned to her. Ma'am, you've been an intern for 3 weeks. I know, she said, cheeks flushing. But people talk. A lot of them feel like leadership only notices mistakes. Lauren gave a small laugh. That's called accountability. Emily looked at me, then back at her parents. Maybe. But accountability without respect just feels like fear. The table went still. For one brief, shining moment, I saw Michael look at his daughter, the way he used to look at me when he was 10 years old, as if a sentence had found a place in him he was not ready to admit existed. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down, and the moment disappeared. I have to take this, he said, pushing back from the table. It's Daniel. Daniel Brooks, the CEO. Michael stepped out onto the patio, already changing his voice into the confident tone he used for important people. Lauren began clearing plates, even though most of us were not finished. Emily helped her. I reached for my plate, but Lauren stopped me. No, Ethan, you're a guest? A guest. In my son's home. I sat there with my hands in my lap, listening to Michael's muffled voice outside through the glass doors. Words floated in pieces: culture problem, retention, strategy, leadership, messaging, trust, rebuilding. Trust, rebuilding. I almost laughed, but it would have come out as tears. Because trust is not rebuilt with messaging. Trust is rebuilt in the small moments when no one is watching. It is rebuilt when a manager admits he was wrong, when a leader knows the name of the night shift custodian, when a company stops treating people like replaceable furniture. I knew that, but in that house, knowledge only counted if it came with a title. After dinner, Emily walked me to my car. The evening air smelled like cut grass and rain on pavement. She held my cobbler dish, still nearly full. I'm sorry, she said. I touched her cheek. For what? For how they talk to you. I looked toward the glowing windows of the house where my son moved through rooms I had helped him reach, but no longer seemed welcome inside. They're busy people, I said. Emily shook her head. That's not an excuse. No, it wasn't. But mothers become experts at softening the truth so it does not break them. As I drove home that night, I kept hearing Michael's voice. You worked in admin. By the time I pulled into the driveway of my small brick ranch house, the rain had started. I sat in the car for a while, watching drops slide down the windshield like tiny roads leading nowhere. Inside my quiet kitchen, I placed my purse on the chair and saw an old framed photograph on the wall. Michael, at 8 years old, missing both front teeth, holding a handmade card that said, "My mom helps everybody." I stood there longer than I should have. Then I turned off the light. I did not know that Emily had gone back inside that night and written down nearly every word I had said. I did not know she would carry those words into Halberg Systems, and I certainly did not know that somewhere inside that company, people I had never met were about to hear my old-fashioned advice and recognize it as the very thing they had been waiting for. The next time Michael dismissed my advice, he did it with an audience. It was not a large audience, just family. Just the people who should have known how to be careful with one another. But sometimes, family can wound you more casually than strangers, because they believe your love gives them permission to speak without kindness. 2 weeks after that Sunday dinner, Michael invited me to Emily's small birthday lunch at a restaurant in downtown Naperville. It was one of those bright modern places with glass walls, tiny portions, and waiters who described vegetables like they were rare jewels. Emily had turned 21, and I was determined to make the day about her, not about the heaviness I still carried from the last time I had sat at Michael's table. I wore a pale blue blouse Robert had once told me made my eyes look young. Before leaving the house, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. At 68, you begin to notice how the world looks through you. Store clerks glance past you. Younger people speak louder than necessary. Even your own children sometimes treat your memories like old furniture. They are too polite to throw away, but too embarrassed to display. Still, I pinned my silver hair, neatly put, on a little lipstick and told myself, today is for Emily. She lit up when she saw me. Grandma Ethan, she said, rising from the table before anyone else did. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment, all the noise in my heart quieted. Emily had inherited Michael's dark eyes, but none of his impatience. She watched people. She listened all the way to the end of a sentence. That made her rare. Michael stood and kissed my cheek. Lauren smiled, already looking over my shoulder to see whether anyone important had noticed them. Sitting beside Lauren was her younger sister Madison, who worked in marketing and spoke like every sentence was a headline. Across from them sat Michael's colleague Greg Wallace, a director from Halberg Systems, whom I had met only once before. His presence surprised me, but Michael explained it quickly. Greg was nearby and wanted to wish Emily happy birthday, he said. Greg lifted his glass. And steal a free lunch. Everyone laughed. For the first half hour, things were pleasant enough. Emily told me about her internship. She said she was working with the internal communications team, helping organize feedback from employees after a recent engagement survey. That sounds important, I said. Michael gave a short laugh. It's mostly sorting comments into categories. Emily's smile faded just a little. Some of the comments are pretty serious, Dad. Greg nodded. She's right. People are frustrated. Michael's jaw tightened. People are always frustrated during growth. That's not new. Lauren leaned toward Madison. Halberg has doubled in size in 3 years. Of course, people are going to complain. Growth does not have to make people feel disposable, I said before I could stop myself. The table grew quieter. Emily looked at me with gentle encouragement. Greg seemed interested. Michael, though, lowered his eyes to his plate, already bracing himself as if I had begun singing in public. I tried to speak carefully. When a company grows fast, people start wondering whether anyone still knows their name. That is when leaders have to become more human, not less. Greg set down his fork. That's actually something we're seeing. A lot of employees say leadership feels distant. Michael turned towards him. We have all-hands meetings every month. Meetings are not the same as connection, I said. Lauren gave a soft, polished laugh. Ethan, sweetheart, you make it sound like everyone needs a hug at work. No, I said. They need proof that their effort matters. Madison raised her eyebrows. That sounds like a great quote for a coffee mug. Michael smiled, and the smile hurt more than I expected. I looked down at my hands. They were older now, with raised veins and small brown spots. But those hands had filled out insurance forms, soothed angry employees, cleaned, scraped knees, balanced grocery money, and held Robert's hand during the last hours of his life. Those hands knew work. They knew love. They knew what people cost when they are taken for granted. Greg leaned forward. What would you do, Mrs. Pierce? The question startled me, not because I had no answer, Because someone at that table had asked, as if my answer might matter. I lifted my eyes to him. I would start by listening to the people nobody usually asks. Michael sighed. We already collect survey data. I don't mean forms, I said. I mean people. The receptionist who hears every complaint before executives do. The new employee who is afraid to admit they are lost. The employee who stays late but never speaks up. The person who cleans the office after everyone leaves. They always know the truth of a place. Greg's expression shifted. He was not laughing. I continued quieter now. Then I would tell managers to stop rewarding only the loudest people in the room. Some of the best workers are quiet because they learned long ago that humility is safer than attention. Emily's eyes moved quickly toward her father. Michael took a sip of water. Mom, this is a little simplistic. There it was again, that gentle pushing away. Is it? I asked. He looked uncomfortable. Modern organizations are complicated. You can't just solve retention with warm feelings. I never said warm feelings solved anything, I replied. Respect is not a warm feeling. It is a discipline. Greg nodded slowly. That's a strong way to put it. Lauren's smile sharpened. Greg, don't encourage her. She'll be running your department by dessert. Everyone laughed again, except Emily. I tried to smile with them, but something in my chest had gone tight. Michael looked at me with that executive patience he had learned somewhere outside my home. Mom, I appreciate that you care, I really do, but my job involves systems that scale. We're not talking about a small office where everyone knows everyone. Then maybe that is the problem, I said. The words came out softer than a whisper, yet everyone heard them. Michael's face changed. What is that supposed to mean? It means when a company becomes too big for kindness, it has become too big for trust. A silence fell over the table. For 1 second, I thought Michael might truly hear me. I saw something pass behind his eyes, memory maybe. A small boy at a kitchen table watching his mother write welcome cards. A child who once believed kindness was not weakness. Then Madison broke the moment. Well, she said, lifting her mimosa that is definitely going on LinkedIn. Lauren laughed. Michael smiled again, relieved to let the moment become a joke. But Emily did not laugh. She reached into her purse beneath the table and pulled out a small notebook. I noticed only because she was sitting beside me. She opened it on her lap and wrote something down. I pretended not to see. After lunch, while Lauren and Madison took photos near the restaurant's flower wall, and Michael checked messages on his phone, Greg approached me by the front windows. I hope I didn't put you on the spot, he said. You didn't. What you said about respect being a discipline, he said. That hit me. I gave him a tired smile. Then use it kindly. He looked almost embarrassed. I wish more people at Halberg talked like that. I glanced toward Michael. Maybe they do. Maybe no one powerful is listening. Greg did not answer, but his face told me the sentence had landed somewhere important. On the drive home, Emily called me. I put her on speaker while I moved slowly through late afternoon traffic. Grandma, she said, do you remember exactly what you said about kindness and trust? I laughed softly. I say too much, sweetheart. Which part? All of it. Why? There was a pause. I just want to remember. Something in her voice told me there was more, but I did not press. Young people reveal the truth best when you give them room to choose courage. So I repeated what I could. I told her that loyalty cannot be bought if dignity is being stolen. I told her that people may accept a paycheck from a company, but they give their heart only where they feel safe. I told her that good leaders do not collect obedience. They earn honesty. I told her that a workplace without respect becomes a room full of people performing survival. Emily was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she whispered, Grandma, why didn't Dad ever listen to you? The question pierced me because I had asked myself the same thing many nights. I looked at the road ahead, the sun lowering behind rows of suburban houses, and answered the only way I knew how. Sometimes, children have to hear the truth from strangers before they recognize it came from home. Emily breathed in shakily. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be." I told her. Just be the kind of person who listens before life has to shout. That night, long after I had made tea and settled into my old armchair, Emily sat in her bedroom at Michael's house and typed my words into a document she titled Culture Notes. I did not know that then. I did not know she would share that document with 3 other interns the next morning. I did not know one of them would send it to a team lead who had been 1 bad week away from resigning. And I certainly did not know that inside Halberg Systems, my words were about to begin traveling faster than my son's authority could contain. The sentence that changed everything was spoken over meatloaf. Not in a boardroom. Not during a leadership retreat. Not beneath expensive lights at a corporate conference where people paid thousands of dollars to hear polished experts explain what ordinary people had always known. It happened in my small kitchen on a rainy Thursday night while I was wearing an old green apron and trying not to burn the mashed potatoes. Michael had called me that afternoon and asked if Lauren and Emily could stop by for dinner. The request surprised me. My son rarely came to my house anymore, unless it was a holiday, an emergency, or something he could fit between meetings. I should have been happy. A mother should feel joy when her child wants to come home. But when Michael's name appeared on my phone, my first feeling was caution. That is how you know love has been bruised. You stop reaching for it with both hands because you are afraid of what might be inside. Still, I said yes. I spent the afternoon cleaning a house that was already clean. I dusted the mantel, arranged fresh napkins, and took out the blue serving dish Robert had bought me on our 20th anniversary. It had a tiny crack near the edge, but I kept it anyway because some things become more precious after they have survived damage. By 6:30, the rain was tapping steadily against the windows. Emily arrived first, her hair damp beneath the hood of her jacket. She hugged me and immediately moved toward the stove. "It smells like childhood in here," she said. I laughed. "You're 21. You still have plenty of childhood left. Not according to my student loans." A few minutes later, Michael and Lauren came in. Michael was still wearing his office suit, his tie loosened but not removed, as if even in my home he could not fully step out of his title. Lauren carried a bottle of wine and looked around my living room with the careful politeness of someone visiting a museum of a life she had no interest in understanding. "This is cozy," she said. Cozy, the word people use when they mean small. We sat down to dinner at my oak table, the same table where Michael had once built model airplanes and cried over algebra homework. I had polished it that afternoon, but there were still faint scratches near his old seat. I never tried too hard to remove them. They reminded me that a home is not meant to remain perfect. It is meant to hold evidence that people lived there. For a while, the conversation stayed safe. Emily talked about a difficult college class. Lauren described a charity luncheon she was helping organize. Michael checked his phone under the table twice, then apologized without sounding sorry. Then his face changed. I knew that look. Something from work had followed him into the room. "Everything all right?" I asked. He set his phone beside his plate. "Not really." Lauren sighed. "It's Halberg again." Emily grew still. Michael rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Another senior product manager resigned today. That makes 7 key resignations in 6 weeks. I set the serving spoon down carefully. "I'm sorry." "It's ridiculous," he said. "We gave her a retention package. A strong one. She still left." "Did she say why Emily asked?" Michael gave a humorless laugh. The usual vague nonsense. Burnout, lack of trust, leadership not listening, Culture concerns. The word culture seemed to irritate him most. Lauren reached for her wine. People have become so dramatic about work. They expect companies to make them feel personally fulfilled every hour of the day. No, Emily said quietly. They expect not to feel invisible. Michael looked at her sharply. Emily. She lowered her eyes, but not before I saw the hurt there. I should have stayed silent. I told myself that. I was in my own home, but even there, I had learned to measure my words around my son. Yet as I watched him dismiss the pain of people who had given years of their lives to his company, I felt that old responsibility rise in me again. You know, I said gently, when someone leaves, even after being offered more money, they are usually not leaving for money. Michael leaned back. Mom, please. I'm only saying. I know what you're saying. His voice was not loud, but it was tired in a way that made me feel like a burden. You think we should just be nicer? I folded my napkin in my lap. No, Mikey L. I think you should be more honest. I know what you're saying. His voice was not loud, but it was tired in a way that made me feel like a burden. You think we should just be nicer? I folded my napkin in my lap. No, Michael. I think you should be more honest. That made him look at me. Lauren's eyebrows lifted. Honest? He repeated. Yes, I said. If people are saying they don't trust leadership, then the question is not how to convince them they are wrong. The question is, what leadership did to lose that trust? His mouth tightened. That is a very easy thing to say from the outside. I looked around my kitchen at the old curtains, the refrigerator covered with Emily's childhood drawings, the framed photograph of Robert beside the window. The outside, I said softly. Is that where I am now? Michael's expression flickered. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. Instead, Lauren stepped in. Ethan, he didn't mean it that way. He just means corporate leadership is complicated. I turned to her. People are complicated. Leadership is only the responsibility of remembering that. Emily looked at me then with such focus that I nearly lost my train of thought. Michael shook his head. We have consultants working on this. We're rebuilding our culture strategy. Culture is not a strategy, I said. It is what people experience when strategy leaves the room. The kitchen went quiet, except for the rain. Michael stared at me. Emily's hand moved slowly toward the notebook she had placed beside her chair. I noticed this time. She opened it under the edge of the table and held her pen ready. I should have stopped, but the words were not coming from pride. They were coming from years of watching good people break quietly under bad leadership. People don't stay where they are paid, I said. They stay where they are valued. Emily wrote it down. Lauren gave a small laugh, but it sounded thinner than usual. That sounds sweet, but companies cannot run on sentimental sayings. I looked at her not with anger, but with exhaustion. That is where you are wrong. Companies are always running on something. Fear, ego, pressure, gratitude, trust, respect. The question is whether leaders know what fuel they are using. Michael pushed his plate away. Mom, you have to understand something, he said. A company like Halberg cannot operate like your old workplace. We have investors' deadlines, competitive threats, legal concerns, scalability issues. You keep talking about respect as if it is a policy. It should be. He gave a short laugh. That's not realistic. No, I said. What is unrealistic is expecting people to give loyalty to a place that only gives them instructions. Emily stopped writing and looked at her father. Michael noticed. His face hardened not toward me, but toward the idea that his own daughter might be listening. Emily, he said, be careful what you absorb. Real leadership requires more than nice phrases. She closed the notebook slowly. Maybe nice phrases sound nice because they're true. Lauren inhaled sharply. Emily, don't be disrespectful. I reached beneath the table and touched Emily's knee, a silent plea not to fight on my behalf. I knew how family arguments could turn. The original wound disappears and everyone begins arguing about tone. So I changed my voice. I made it gentler. Michael, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. I know you have pressures I may not understand. But I do know this. When people stop believing leaders care about them, they begin protecting themselves from the company instead of protecting the company with you. That sentence landed differently. Michael did not mock it. He looked down at the table. For the first time that evening, he looked less annoyed than tired. I don't have time to personally reassure thousands of employees, he said. No, I replied. But you have time to teach managers not to humiliate them. You have time to reward people who build trust, not just people who hit numbers. You have time to ask who is quietly holding the place together before they quietly walk away. No one spoke. The rain grew harder. In that silence, I saw my son as both man and boy. The executive with the expensive watch. The child who once cried because another boy at school called him poor. Maybe that old shame had never left him. Maybe he had built his whole career trying to become the kind of man nobody could look down on. And maybe somewhere along the way, he had mistaken tenderness for weakness because tenderness reminded him too much of where he came from. I wanted to reach across the table and touch his hand. But Lauren rose abruptly and began gathering plates. Well, she said too brightly, this got heavy. Michael stood as well. I need to make a call. Just like that, the moment was over. He walked onto the porch with his phone. Lauren carried dishes to the sink. Emily stayed seated, her hand resting on the closed notebook. When Lauren stepped out of the kitchen, Emily whispered, Grandma, can I use that quote? What quote? People don't stay where they are paid. They stay where they are valued. I smiled sadly. Sweetheart, it isn't mine. It's just something life taught me. That still means it came through you. I did not know what to say to that. Before they left, Michael hugged me with one arm while still looking at his phone. Lauren thanked me for dinner and told me the meatloaf was very nostalgic, which I chose to accept as a compliment. Emily lingered at the door. I love you, she said. I love you too. Then she stepped into the rain and carried my words with her. The next morning, inside Halberg Systems, Emily typed that sentence at the top of a document she had been quietly building for weeks. Beneath it, she added every lesson I had shared over family meals, car rides, and late-night phone calls. She did not put my name on it, not yet. She only titled it Quiet Respect Rules. By noon, 3 interns had read it. By Friday, a team lead had printed it and taped it beside the coffee machine. By Monday, people I had never met were standing in front of that paper, reading my words as if someone had finally opened a window in a room where they had been struggling to breathe. At first, my words traveled through Halberg Systems like a whisper. Not an official announcement, not a company initiative, not a polished memo approved by leadership and softened by legal language, just a page taped beside a coffee machine. Quiet Respect Rules, that was what Emily had called it. I did not know any of this at the time. My world remained small and ordinary. I watered the ferns on my porch. I attended Tuesday morning Bible study with my friend Joanne. I bought discounted chicken thighs at Kroger and stretched them into 3 meals because old habits from lean years never truly leave a woman. I folded laundry in silence and pretended I was not waiting for Michael to call. He did not. Emily did, though. She called me more often that month, sometimes during her lunch break, sometimes while walking from one building to another at Halberg. She never told me too much, only little things. Grandma, she said one afternoon, her voice low and excited. What would you tell a manager who only praises people after they threaten to quit? I was sitting at my kitchen table, peeling apples. I would tell him, praise given too late feels like a receipt, not gratitude. She was quiet for a second. Then I heard typing. Emily, I said, smiling despite myself. Are you writing this down? Maybe? What are you doing with all these things, I say? Learning. She answered quickly. That was all. I should have asked more. But I liked being asked. I liked hearing her listen. After years of watching Michael's face close whenever I spoke, Emily's curiosity felt like sunlight coming through a window I had forgotten could open. Inside Halberg, that single printed page began appearing in places no consultant had ever reached. The first person to tape it up was a team lead named Aaron Miller. I learned his name much later. At the time, he was simply one exhausted man standing in a break room on the 4th floor reading the words, "People don't stay where they are paid. They stay where they are valued." Aaron had been with Halberg for 6 years. He managed a small software support team that handled late-night emergencies for hospital clients. His people were tired. They were under-recognized. They were blamed when things went wrong and forgotten when things went right. He had been quietly updating his resume. That morning, he read Emily's page 3 times. Then he took it down, made 6 copies, and taped one inside the small meeting room where his team gathered every Monday. At their next meeting, instead of beginning with error reports, he looked at his employees and said, "Before we talk about what broke last week, I want to talk about what you held together." No one knew what to do with that. A woman named Priya laughed because she thought he was joking. A young technician named Marcus looked suspicious as if kindness were a trap. Another employee, Dana, stared down at the table and blinked too fast. But Aaron kept going. He named specific things each person had done. He thanked Marcus for staying late to help a new hire understand the system. He thanked Dana for calming a panicked hospital administrator at 2 a.m. He thanked Priya for catching a mistake in documentation before it reached a client. By the end of the meeting, no strategy had changed. No budget had increased. No executive had appeared with grand promises. But the room felt different. That was how culture begins. Not with a slogan, with one person choosing to treat another person as if they matter. Emily called me that night. "Grandma," she asked, "do people always trust change right away?" "No," I said. "People who have been disappointed need evidence, not speeches." "What kind of evidence?" "Consistency," I told her. "Respect once can be performance. Respect, repeated, becomes safety." She went quiet again, typing. A few days later, that sentence appeared under quiet respect rule number 4. Respect once can be performance. Respect repeated becomes safety. From Aaron's team, the note spread to customer operations, then to the onboarding group, then to a private employee chat where people usually shared jokes, complaints, and warnings about which conference rooms had broken screens. Someone posted a photo of the page and wrote, "Whoever wrote this understands this place better than leadership does." Another person replied, "This should be mandatory manager training." Someone else wrote, "Too bad executives will turn it into a slide deck and ruin it." That comment made people laugh, but underneath the joke was hunger. People were tired of language that sounded human but led nowhere. They had endured listening sessions where no one listened, recognition programs that recognized only favorites, and culture surveys that vanished into silence. They did not need another campaign. They needed proof that someone remembered work was made of people. Emily watched the notes spread with growing nervousness. She had only meant to share them with a few interns. Then one intern sent them to his supervisor. A supervisor sent them to a department channel. Someone else copied them into a document and added spacing bullet points and a clean title page. Soon, people were asking where the notes came from. Emily did not answer, not because she was ashamed of me, because she was afraid of Michael. She knew her father. She knew he would not enjoy discovering that the advice he mocked over dinner had become more useful inside his company than anything his leadership team had produced in months. One Friday afternoon, Emily found herself in a conference room with Rachel Morgan, the Director of Internal Communications. Rachel was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed calm, and known for noticing what others missed. She had invited several interns to discuss employee engagement trends. Emily thought it would be routine. It was not. Rachel placed a printed copy of Quiet Respect Rules on the table. "Has anyone seen this before?" she asked. The room went silent. Emily looked down at her notebook. Rachel did not accuse anyone. She simply waited. That is a rare skill. Most people rush to fill silence. Rachel let it work. Finally, one intern said, "It's been going around." "I know," Rachel said. "That's why I'm asking." Another intern shifted in his chair. "People like it." Rachel smiled faintly. "People do not just like it. They are responding to it more strongly than anything we have sent out officially in the last year." Emily's heart began beating harder. Rachel continued, "A support team used it to change their Monday meeting format. A product group created a peer recognition board based on rule number 2. A manager in client integration canceled a status meeting and replaced it with one-on-one check-ins after reading rule number 6. One intern whispered, "Seriously?" "Seriously," Rachel said. Then she looked directly at Emily. "Do you know where it came from?" Emily froze. She thought of Michael's voice. "Be careful what you absorb." She thought of Lauren laughing. "Don't encourage her." Then she thought of me standing alone in my kitchen after everyone left, pretending not to be hurt. Emily swallowed. "I wrote it down," she said. Rachel leaned forward. "You wrote it. I typed it," Emily corrected softly. "But the ideas weren't mine." "Whose were they?" Emily hesitated. "My grandmother's." No one spoke. Rachel looked at the paper again. For a moment, her professional expression changed into something much more human. "Your grandmother works here?" Emily shook her head. "No, she's retired from a manufacturing company. She worked in administration for years." An intern across the table smiled. "Of course she did." Rachel looked up. "Why do you say that?" "Because admin people know everything he said. They know who's unhappy before executives do." Rachel's smile grew. Emily felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time, someone inside Halberg had heard my story and had not made it smaller. Rachel gathered the papers carefully. "Emily, I would like to hear more about your grandmother." Emily's eyes widened. "Why?" "Because if these ideas are moving through the company this quickly, then they are meeting a need leadership has failed to meet." That sentence frightened Emily because it was true. Meanwhile, Michael had begun noticing strange changes without understanding them. In one department, voluntary resignations paused. In another, managers began sending weekly notes recognizing quiet contributions. A team that had been known for conflict started holding repair conversations after tense meetings. New hires reported feeling more welcomed. Employees who had been disengaged began speaking up in small ways. Michael saw the numbers. But he did not see me. At home, he told Lauren, "Something odd is happening. Engagement comments are shifting." Lauren barely looked up from her tablet. "Good odd or bad odd?" "Good," he said. "But I don't know where it's coming from." Emily sat at the kitchen island, pretending to scroll through her phone. Michael continued. "Some managers are using this phrase quiet respect. I've heard it 3 times this week." Lauren shrugged. Maybe one of your consultants finally earned their fee. Michael smiled. Emily's fingers tightened around her phone. She wanted to say, "No, Dad. It wasn't a consultant. It was Grandma. It was the woman you told to stop talking." But courage is not always loud at first. Sometimes courage begins as a secret document, a copied page, a sentence passed from one tired employee to another, like a small flame cupped against the wind. And though I still knew nothing about quiet respect rules, something I had learned over a lifetime was beginning to prove itself without my permission. Truth does not need a title to travel. The company began changing before anyone in leadership understood why. That is the strange thing about real culture. It rarely asks permission from the people with the biggest offices. It moves quietly through hallways between desks, across lunch tables, inside tired conversations after meetings end. By the time executives notice it, the change has already taken root somewhere far below their polished reports. At Halberg Systems, the first sign was not dramatic. It was silence, not empty silence, not the cold silence of fear. A different kind. The silence of people pausing before they spoke, choosing words with more care than before. In the support department, Aaron Miller's team stopped beginning Monday meetings with mistakes. They began with something they called held together moments. Each person named one thing another teammate had done that helped the group survive the week. At first, it felt awkward. People laughed. Some rolled their eyes. But by the third week, employees were coming prepared. Dana thanked Marcus for taking a difficult hospital call when her mother was in the emergency room. Marcus thanked Priya for correcting his documentation without embarrassing him. Priya thanked Aaron for asking whether she had enough coverage before assigning another urgent task. These were small things. But small things are not small to people who have been starving for them. In client integration, a manager named Stephanie read Quiet Respect Rule Number 3. The quietest person in the room may be carrying the heaviest truth. The sentence bothered her all morning. She led a team of 12, and she realized she had built her meetings around the same 3 confident voices. So that afternoon, she changed the format. Instead of asking, "Does anyone have concerns?" at the end of the meeting when everyone was already tired, she began by asking each person to write one concern privately. Then she read them aloud without names. For the first time in months, the real problems surfaced. A new hire was afraid to admit he had never been properly trained on a critical platform. A senior analyst was doing duplicate work because 2 departments refused to share information. 3 employees felt their manager rewarded speed over accuracy, then blamed them when rushed work caused errors. Stephanie sat there with those anonymous notes in her hands and felt something inside her crack open. Not shame, exactly. Responsibility. That evening, she wrote in an internal leadership channel, "I tried something from Quiet Respect Rules today. We uncovered more truth in 20 minutes than our last 3 status meetings combined." By morning, 36 managers had reacted to the message. By the end of the week, Quiet Respect Rules had moved beyond a copied page. It had become a phrase people used when something felt honest. "That's not quiet respect," someone would say when a manager interrupted a junior employee. "Quiet respect means we don't let her take the blame alone," another person said when a project failed because leadership had ignored warnings. Ask the people closest to the work. A team lead reminded a director who wanted to make a process change without consulting the employees who actually used the process. No one knew my name. No one knew I was sitting at home clipping coupons and wondering whether my son still liked peach cobbler. But my words were walking through his company. Michael noticed the results before he noticed the source. He arrived at the executive meeting on a Tuesday morning, carrying a sleek leather portfolio and the confidence of a man who had been waiting for good news. Around the long glass table sat Daniel Brooks, the CEO of Halberg Systems, Rachel Morgan from Internal Communications, David Carter, the CFO. and several senior leaders whose faces Michael had learned to read like financial statements. Daniel was 58 with silver hair, calm eyes, and the kind of authority that did not need volume. He had founded Halberg after leaving a large healthcare software company where, according to rumor, he had grown tired of watching executives talk about innovation while treating employees like disposable parts. Michael admired Daniel, but also feared disappointing him. That morning, Rachel presented the employee engagement trends. Voluntary resignation notices have slowed in 4 departments, she said, clicking to the first slide. Not stopped, but slowed. David Carter leaned forward. Seasonal fluctuation. Unlikely. Voluntary resignation notices have slowed in 4 departments, she said, clicking to the first slide. Not stopped, but slowed. David Carter leaned forward. Seasonal fluctuation. Unlikely, Rachel replied. The change is concentrated in teams where managers have adopted new recognition and listening practices. Michael's eyebrows lifted slightly. From the retention plan, Rachel hesitated just long enough for Daniel to notice. Partly, she said. Michael straightened. The leadership toolkit my team distributed included manager check-in templates, recognition prompts, and escalation guidelines. Rachel looked at him with professional neutrality. Yes, but the language managers are using does not appear to come from the toolkit. David frowned. Then where is it coming from? Rachel clicked to the next slide. On the screen appeared the title, Quiet Respect Rules. Michael stared at it. Something about the phrase made him uneasy, though he could not yet say why. Rachel continued. This document has circulated informally across multiple departments. We are tracking references to it in team channels, internal chats, and meeting notes. Daniel leaned back, reading silently. Michael gave a careful laugh. So, employees are sharing unofficial culture material. They are, Rachel said, and responding strongly, David's mouth tightened. That can be dangerous. Unapproved messaging creates inconsistency. Daniel did not look at David. His eyes remained on the screen. Or it reveals a need our approved messaging failed to meet. The room went quiet. Rachel advanced the slide again. This one contained several phrases from the document. Respect once can be performance. Respect repeated becomes safety. People don't stay where they are paid. They stay where they are valued. Ask the people. Nobody usually asks. Trust is rebuilt in small moments when no one is watching. Michael's face changed, only slightly, but Rachel saw it. So did Daniel. Michael, Daniel said. Michael blinked. Yes. You recognize any of this? A normal man might have paused. A humble man might have wondered. But Michael was under pressure, and pressure reveals what pride has been protecting. He smiled in that controlled executive way and said, The themes are consistent with what my office has been pushing for months. Rachel's eyes shifted toward him. Daniel's expression did not change. Are they? Yes, Michael said more firmly. We've been trying to move managers toward human-centered leadership. It looks like the message is finally landing. I was not in that room, of course, but later, when I learned what he said, I sat very still for a long time, because there are many ways a child can hurt a mother. Ignoring her is one. Laughing at her is another. But taking what came from her heart and allowing the world to believe it came from his authority, that is a quieter kind of theft. Daniel looked at Rachel. Continue. Rachel did, though she made a note beside Michael's answer. After the meeting, Daniel asked her to stay behind. When the others left, he walked toward the screen where quiet respect rules still glowed in clean black letters. This doesn't sound like consultant language, he said. No, Rachel replied. It doesn't. It sounds lived. Rachel nodded. I agree. Do we know who wrote it? Rachel took a slow breath. The typed document came from an intern. Daniel turned. An intern, Emily Pierce. His brows lifted. Michael's daughter? Yes. Daniel looked back at the screen. And the ideas? Rachel hesitated. She says they came from her grandmother. Daniel said nothing for several seconds. Outside the conference room, Windows employees moved through the open office carrying laptops, coffee cups, and the invisible weight of wanting their work to matter. Daniel watched them, then read the first line again. People don't stay where they are paid. They stay where they are valued. That, he said quietly, was not written by someone trying to impress leadership. No, Rachel said. It was written by someone who understands people. Daniel's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Find out more. Rachel nodded. Discreetly, very. Meanwhile, Michael began accepting praise. At first, it came in small comments. Looks like your culture push is working, David Carter told him near the elevators. Michael smiled. We're making progress. A senior VP clapped him on the shoulder. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, Michael said. That's the plan. With each compliment, the truth had another chance to rise in his throat. He could have said, actually, we're still tracing where this came. F-ROM. He could have said, my daughter may know more than I do. He could have said nothing and simply waited. Instead, he let admiration settle on him like a coat he knew did not belong to him. At home, Lauren was thrilled. Finally, Rom. He could have said, my daughter may know more than I do. He could have said nothing and simply waited. Instead, he let admiration settle on him like a coat he knew did not belong to him. At home, Lauren was thrilled. Finally, she said, pouring wine in their kitchen. People are seeing your value. Emily sat nearby, her stomach twisting. Michael loosened his tie. Daniel seemed impressed. Lauren smiled. Of course he was. You've been saying culture needed a reset for months. Emily looked up. Dad, did you tell him where quiet respect rules came from? The room chilled. Michael turned slowly. What do you mean? Emily's voice was small but steady. I mean, it didn't come from your office. Lauren set the wine bottle down. Emily. No, Emily said, standing now. Grandma said those things. I wrote them down. Michael's face tightened with embarrassment first, then irritation. Your grandmother shared some general thoughts, he said. You turned them into notes. The company interpreted them through existing leadership priorities. That's how ideas work. Emily stared at him. That's how credit disappears, she said. Lauren gasped. Do not speak to your father like that. Michael pointed toward the stairs. Enough. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she did not move. You laughed at her, she whispered. Both of you did. For 1 second, Michael looked struck. Then his pride rescued him from guilt. You are too young to understand how organizations work, he said. Emily wiped her cheek. Maybe, but I understand how disrespect sounds. She walked upstairs, leaving Michael and Lauren in silence. Across town, I sat alone at my kitchen table, unaware of the argument my words had caused. Rain tapped softly at the window. My phone stayed quiet. Then, just before 9, Emily texted me. Grandma, did you ever feel like people used your wisdom but didn't want to respect where it came from? I read the message twice. Then I typed back, yes, sweetheart, but wisdom does not become less true because someone refuses to honor its source. I did not know Rachel Morgan would read that sentence 2 days later. I did not know Daniel Brooks would ask to see every note Emily had kept, and I did not know that my son's borrowed spotlight was already beginning to flicker. The praise changed Michael before the truth caught up with him. At least, that was how Emily described it later. She said it was subtle at first, a straighter posture when he walked through the office, a warmer tone when senior leaders passed by, a new confidence in meetings as if the improvement in company morale had proven something he had always believed about himself. But it had not proven what he thought it had. It had proven that wisdom can survive mockery. It had proven that people recognize truth, even when it arrives without a title. And painfully, it had proven that my son was willing to stand close enough to borrowed light that others mistook it for his own. Michael did not come to my house during those weeks. He called once briefly while driving between meetings. "Just checking in," he said. I was sitting on the back porch, shelling peas into a white bowl. "That's nice," I replied. "How are things at work?" "Busy," he said. "But better." "Better?" "Yes, the culture issues are improving." Daniel seems pleased. I smiled into the phone because I wanted to be happy for him. I did not yet know the reason things were improving. I did not know my words were pinned on walls, copied into chats, and quoted in meetings. "That's wonderful, Michael." He paused, then said, "It took a lot of work." "I'm sure it did." There was another pause, a small one, but I have lived long enough to hear what silence carries. That pause had discomfort in it. Before I could ask anything else, he said, "I have to jump. I'll call soon." He did not call soon. At Halberg, the executive attention around quiet respect rules kept growing. Departments that had struggled for months were suddenly showing signs of life. Employees were not transformed overnight. People are not machines you can reset. Something had shifted. The quiet ones were speaking. Managers were apologizing more quickly. Teams were naming resentment before it hardened into resignation. Daniel Brooks wanted answers. Rachel Morgan began gathering them. She did not approach Emily like an investigator. She approached her like a person who understood that truth, when handled, roughly retreats. They met in Rachel's office on a Wednesday afternoon. Emily sat in a gray chair beside the window, twisting the strap of her tote bag around her fingers. Rachel had a printed folder on her desk, but she did not open it right away. "I want you to know something before we talk," Rachel said. "You are not in trouble." Emily nodded, but her shoulders remained tense. Rachel continued, "When something honest appears inside a company, leadership has two choices. We can control it until it dies, or we can understand it before we touch it. I would rather understand." Emily looked up. That sentence made her trust Rachel a little. Rachel opened the folder. Inside were screenshots, printed notes, Slack messages, and copies of quiet respect rules with handwritten additions from different teams. "These ideas are spreading because people need them," Rachel said. "But they came from somewhere. You told me they came from our grandmother." Emily swallowed. "Yes. These ideas are spreading because people need them," Rachel said. "But they came from somewhere. You told me they came from somewhere. You told me they came from our grandmother." Emily swallowed. "Yes." "Ethan Pierce." Emily's eyes widened. "You know her name?" "I know your father's last name," Rachel said gently. And you mentioned her first name before, our grandmother." Emily swallowed. "Yes." "Ethan Pierce." Emily's eyes widened. "You know her name?" "I know your father's last name," Rachel said gently. "And you mentioned her first name before." Emily relaxed slightly. Rachel slid one page across the desk. "Did she say this?" Emily read it. "People don't stay where they are paid. They stay where they are valued." Her eyes filled. Yes, she whispered. At her kitchen table. My dad was complaining about people leaving the company. Rachel's expression softened. And this respect once can be performance. Respect repeated becomes safety. She said that on the phone. I asked if people trust change right away. Rachel made a note. And this one. When a company becomes too big for kindness, it has become too big for trust. Emily gave a sad little laugh. She said that at my birthday lunch. Everyone laughed. Rachel stopped writing. Emily looked toward the office door, as though Michael might somehow hear her through the building. My parents, she said. My aunt. They thought she was being sentimental. And your father? Emily's mouth trembled. He always does that. Rachel waited. Emily took a shaky breath. He loves her, I think, but he's ashamed of needing anything from her. He acts like her wisdom is old-fashioned because it came from a small house and not a conference stage. Rachel sat very still. Then she closed the folder. Emily, has your father told leadership these ideas came from Ethan? Emily stared at her hands. No. Has he implied they came from his office? Emily did not answer right away. The silence answered first. Finally, she said, he said the themes were consistent with what his office had been pushing. Rachel's face remained calm, but something in her eyes sharpened. I see. Emily wiped her cheek, quickly embarrassed by the tear. I don't want to hurt my dad, she said. I understand. But I don't want Grandma erased either. Rachel leaned forward. That is not disloyal. That is integrity. Emily looked at her as if she had been waiting weeks for someone to say that. Later that afternoon, Rachel brought the folder to Daniel. He stood by his office window, overlooking downtown Chicago. Below, cars moved through the streets like tiny pieces on a board. Daniel listened without interrupting as Rachel explained everything Emily had shared. When she finished, he asked only one question. Does Michael know we know? Not yet. Daniel nodded slowly. Good. Rachel seemed surprised. Good. If we confront him now, he will defend himself. If we observe a little longer, we will learn whether this was confusion pride or character. Rachel looked down at the folder. And Ethan Pierce. Daniel's voice softened. I want to meet her eventually. Eventually, not as a prop, not as a surprise witness. If this woman built something our leaders failed to build, we owe her more than a rushed thank you. Rachel nodded. Then Daniel looked at the printed quote again. Ask the people nobody usually asks. He tapped the page once. It seems we should start by following her own advice. Meanwhile, Michael's borrowed credit began turning into real opportunity. At the next leadership meeting, David Carter presented quarterly numbers. The financial results were steady, but what impressed the room most were the early retention improvements. David glanced toward Michael. Whatever People Operations is doing appears to be reducing disruption costs. Michael smiled modestly. Daniel watched him. A senior vice president said, Michael, could your team present the Culture Reset Framework at next month's All-Company Leadership Summit? Michael did not hesitate. Absolutely. Rachel looked at him from across the table. Daniel said nothing. That night, Michael came home energized. Emily heard him before she saw him, his voice carrying from the foyer. Lauren, you won't believe this. Lauren appeared from the living room. What happened? They want me to present at the Leadership Summit. Lauren's face lit up. Michael, that's huge. It could position me for Chief Operating Officer eventually, he said, lowering his voice as if even the possibility deserved reverence. Emily stood at the top of the staircase unseen. Lauren embraced him. "I told you people would finally see what you bring to the table." Michael laughed softly. "Daniel has been watching, I can tell." Emily stepped down one stair. "Dad," she said. Both of them turned. Michael's smile faded slightly. "What? Are you going to mention Grandma in the presentation?" Lauren's face closed immediately. "Emily, not this again." Michael sighed. "The presentation is about organizational change." "Exactly," Emily said. And those changes started with her words. They started with many things. "No," Emily said, coming down another step. "They started when I shared what she said." Michael's tone hardened. "You shared it inside my company without context, without approval. And now you think you understand the entire transformation." Emily's face flushed. "I understand enough to know you're letting people praise you for something you mocked when it came from her." Lauren crossed her arms. "Your father has spent years building his career. Do not reduce his work to a few comments your grandmother made over dinner." Emily looked at her mother in disbelief. "A few comments? Those comments changed how people are treating each other." Michael pointed toward her. "Careful. No, Dad. You be careful. Because if you stand on that stage and pretend quiet respect rules came from your leadership plan, you won't just be disrespecting Grandma. You'll be proving you still don't understand the rules at all." For a moment, nobody moved. Michael's face darkened, not with rage, but with shame trying to disguise itself as authority. "You are done," he said. Emily's eyes shone, but she did not apologize. She turned and went back upstairs. Michael stood in the foyer, breathing hard. Lauren touched his arm. "She's young," Lauren said. "She doesn't understand." But Michael did understand. That was the problem. Upstairs, Emily closed her bedroom door and opened her laptop. She stared at the document that had started everything. At the bottom, beneath all the quiet respect rules, she typed one final note. Source, Ethan Pierce. "My grandmother, who taught me that respect without credit is still disrespect. She saved it." Then, with trembling hands, she sent the updated version to Rachel Morgan. At nearly the same hour, I was sitting in my living room with an old quilt over my knees, watching a rerun of a cooking show I was not really paying attention to. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. "Grandma, if someone important ever asks you where your wisdom came from, what would you say?" I smiled sadly and typed back. "I would say it came from paying attention when other people were hurting." I had no idea that message would be forwarded to Rachel. I had no idea Rachel would show it to Daniel. And I had no idea that while Michael was preparing to step into the spotlight, the people above him were quietly tracing every beam of that light back to me. The invitation arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, tucked inside a cream-colored envelope with Halberg Systems printed in silver across the front. I found it in my mailbox between a grocery flyer and a bill from the electric company. At first, I assumed it had been sent to the wrong address. Companies like Halberg did not usually send elegant envelopes to retired widows living in small brick ranch houses with cracked driveways and bird feeders in the yard. I carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen table. For several minutes, I did not open it. That may sound silly, but age teaches you caution with official-looking envelopes. Sometimes they bring bad news dressed in nice paper. I made myself a cup of tea first, wiped my hands on a dish towel, then slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside was a formal invitation to Halberg Systems' annual leadership gala. The event would be held at a grand hotel in downtown Chicago. There would be dinner award speeches and a celebration of the people and values shaping Halberg's future. At the bottom, written in neat ink beneath the printed text, was a small handwritten note. "Mrs. Pierce, we would be honored by your presence. Daniel Brooks, Chief Executive Officer." I read it once, Then again, then a third time. Mrs. Pierce, not Ethan, not Mom, not Grandma, not Michael's mother. Someone had written my name with respect. A strange warmth moved through me, followed quickly by confusion. I had never met Daniel Brooks. I knew his name only because Michael said it often, usually with the careful tone people use for those who can change their future. I picked up the phone and called Michael. He answered on the fourth ring. "Hey, Mom. I'm between meetings. Everything okay?" "I received an invitation from your company," I said. "For a gala." There was a pause. "Oh, right. Yes, you knew about it. Daniel's office mentioned they were sending invitations to some family members this year. It's part of the leadership recognition program." I looked at the note again. He wrote that he would be honored by my presence. Another pause. Michael's voice changed just slightly. "That's probably something his assistant adds to VIP invitations." Oh. The warmth in me cooled a little, but I tried not to show it. "Should I come?" I asked. "Of course," he said quickly. "It's a big night. It would look good to have family there. It would look good. Not I want you there. Not I'd be proud for you to come. It would look good." I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. "I see." Michael seemed to sense he had said the wrong thing because he softened his tone. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that. I just mean it's a formal event. You'll enjoy it. What should I wear?" "Something nice," he said. Then after a beat, "Lauren can help." I almost laughed. Lauren's help usually felt less like assistance and more like correction. Still, I said, "All right." Before hanging up, Michael added, "And Mom." "Yes. It's a professional environment. There will be executives, investors, board members. Just let the evening flow." I knew what he meant. Do not talk too much. Do not tell old stories. Do not embarrass me. I held the phone tighter. "I know how to behave in public, Michael. That's not what I meant." But it was. After we hung up, I left the invitation on the table and stared out the window at the maple tree Robert had planted when Michael was 12. The tree had grown tall and wide, stronger than either of us had expected. Robert used to say roots do their most important work where no one applauds them. I wondered if people ever thought about roots during galas. That evening, Emily came over without warning. She arrived carrying takeout soup and a nervous smile. "Mom and Dad are arguing about your dress," she said as soon as she stepped inside. "My dress?" I asked. She set the soup on the counter. "Grandma, you haven't even chosen one, and they're already worried." I shook my head. "That sounds efficient." Emily laughed, but her eyes were troubled. We ate soup at the kitchen table. She asked to see the invitation, and when I handed it to her, she traced Daniel's handwritten note with her eyes. "He wrote this himself," she said. "How can you know?" "Because I've seen his handwriting on notes at work." That made my heart beat a little faster. Why would he invite me personally? Emily looked down at her spoon. Maybe he knows more than Dad thinks. I studied her face. "Emily." She looked up. "What is going on?" For a moment, I thought she would tell me everything. I saw the truth pressing against her lips. But loyalty is complicated when you are young and caught between people you love. She only said, "Just promise me you'll come." "Why?" "Because you deserve to be in the room." That sentence stayed with me. The next Saturday, Lauren insisted on taking me shopping. She arrived at my house in a white SUV with oversized sunglasses and an energy that made me feel like a project. Michael sat in the passenger seat scrolling through emails. He barely looked up when I came out. Lauren stepped from the car and smiled. "Ethan, we're going to find you something elegant. I have a navy dress from Emily's graduation," I said. Lauren's smile tightened. "That was lovely for graduation. This is different." At the boutique, she moved through racks of clothing with brisk certainty. She chose dresses in colors I had never worn and fabrics that seemed afraid of wrinkles. The saleswoman called me dear 3 times in 10 minutes. Michael sat near the front answering messages. I tried on a silver dress first. It clung too tightly at the waist and made me feel like I was pretending to be someone else. Lauren tilted her head. "It's almost right," she said. Almost. The second dress was black severe and expensive enough to make me afraid to breathe. Lauren loved it. Michael glanced up briefly and said, "That looks fine." Fine. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman being prepared not to shine, but to avoid causing trouble. Then Emily appeared behind me. She had met us after work, still wearing her intern badge around her neck. She looked at the black dress, then at my face. "No," she said. Lauren blinked. "Excuse me? That's not Grandma." "It's appropriate," Lauren said. Emily walked to another rack and pulled out a deep blue dress with soft sleeves and a modest neckline. Simple, graceful, the color of evening sky after rain. "Try this," she said. I did. When I stepped out, Emily's eyes filled before she smiled. "There," she whispered. "That's you." Even Michael looked up longer that time. Something moved across his face. Memory, maybe. I wondered if he was seeing the pale blue blouse I used to wear to his school awards nights, or the dress I wore when he graduated college, or simply the mother he had been too busy to notice. Then Lauren cleared her throat. "It's a little understated," she said. Emily answered before I could. "Good. She doesn't need to perform importance." Michael stood. "It's fine. Let's get it." There was that word again. Fine. But I bought the dress anyway because when I looked in the mirror, I recognized myself. In the days that followed, Michael became increasingly tense. He practiced his summit remarks at home, though no one called it practice. Lauren helped him refine phrases. "Say transformation, not improvement," she told him one evening while Emily sat nearby. Michael repeated, "Our cultural transformation reflects a renewed commitment to trust-based leadership." Emily's pen stopped moving. "Trust-based leadership," she said. Michael glanced at her. "Yes." "Are you going to mention quiet respect rules?" He closed his laptop. "Emily." "Are you?" Lauren's voice sharpened. "Enough." Michael took a long breath. "The gala is not the place for family drama." Emily laughed once bitterly. "That's convenient, since the family is where the truth started." Michael's face hardened. "You will not ruin this night." Emily stood. "No, Dad, I think you're afraid Grandma's presence will ruin the story you're trying to tell." He did not answer, because sometimes silence is the closest pride can come to confession. 2 days before the gala, Rachel Morgan called Emily into her office again. Daniel Brooks was there. Emily froze in the doorway. Daniel stood immediately. "Emily, thank you for coming." She looked terrified. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Daniel said. "You did something brave." Rachel handed her a printed program for the gala. One section had been left blank. Special recognition segment. Emily stared at it. Daniel spoke gently. "We are planning to honor the source of quiet respect rules." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. "My grandmother, if she is willing," Daniel said. "Does my dad know?" Daniel's expression grew unreadable. "Not yet." Emily looked from Daniel to Rachel. "He's going to be furious." "Perhaps," Daniel said. "But anger does not decide what is true." Emily's eyes filled. Daniel continued. I do not want to ambush your grandmother, but I also do not want her erased. Rachel will reach out carefully before the event. That explained the note. That explained the invitation. But I did not know any of that yet. All I knew was that on the morning of the gala, Lauren called and reminded me 3 times not to be nervous, not to wander away from the family table, and not to get pulled into long conversations. "You'll be comfortable if you just follow our lead," she said. I looked at the blue dress hanging on my closet door. For once, I did not answer immediately. Then I said, "Lauren, I have been following other people's lead for a very long time." She went quiet. I added softly, "Maybe tonight I'll simply sit where I'm invited." I hung up before she could correct me, and for the first time in weeks I wondered if perhaps that invitation had not been a mistake at all. The day of the gala began with a quiet kind of dread. I woke before sunrise, though the event would not begin until evening. For a long time, I lay still beneath my quilt, watching pale morning light spread across the ceiling of my bedroom. At 68, I had learned the difference between nervousness and warning. Nervousness flutters. Warning settles heavy in the bones. That morning, I felt both. The blue dress hung on the closet door, where I had left it soft and dignified, waiting for me like a question. I touched the sleeve as I passed. The fabric was smooth beneath my fingers, not flashy, not expensive looking, but honest. I liked that about it. At my age, I had no patience left for clothes that tried to lie on my behalf. I spent the day slowly. I polished my black shoes. I took my time curling the ends of my silver hair. I chose Robert's small pearl earrings from the jewelry box he had given me on our 25th anniversary. I had not worn them in years. When I fastened them, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "Well, Robert, I hope I don't embarrass anybody tonight." The room, of course, gave no answer, but I imagined his. "You never embarrassed me a day in your life, Ethan." That steadied me for a little while. Michael and Lauren were supposed to pick me up at 5. At 4:30, Lauren called. "We're running a little tight," she said. "Please be ready when we arrive." "I am ready. And Ethan?" "Yes, there will be photographers near the entrance. Just stay close to us. Don't stop unless Michael stops." I closed my eyes. "All right. And if anyone asks how you're connected, just say you're Michael's mother." I opened my eyes again. "What else would I say?" She laughed lightly as if I had missed the point. "Nothing. That's perfect." After we hung up, I sat in the living room with my purse in my lap. The house was so quiet, I could hear the wall clock ticking. I thought about staying home, just for a moment. I imagined calling Michael and saying I felt unwell. No one would be surprised. Maybe they would even be relieved. But then I saw Daniel Brooks's handwritten note on the table. "We would be honored by your presence." Maybe it was only politeness. Maybe Michael was right, and an assistant had written the same kind of message on dozens of invitations. But still, I had been invited, and something in me, something small, but stubborn, refused to hide simply because others preferred me invisible. At 5:12, headlights swept across my front window. I stepped outside before Michael could honk. The moment I opened the car door, Lauren's eyes moved over me from hair to shoes. She smiled, but I saw the inspection beneath it. "You look nice," she said. Michael glanced back from the driver's seat. "You ready?" The moment I opened the car door, Lauren's eyes moved over me from hair to shoes. She smiled, but I saw the inspection beneath it. "You look nice," she said. Michael glanced back from the driver's seat. "You ready?" "Yes." Emily was in the back seat wearing a dark green dress and a worried expression. She reached for my hand as soon as I sat beside her. "You look beautiful," she whispered. That was the first word anyone had used that evening that felt like it belonged to me. Thank you, sweetheart. The drive to Chicago should have been pleasant. The sky was turning gold, and the city rose ahead of us, glass buildings catching the last light. But inside, the car tension sat between us like a fifth passenger. Michael kept reviewing notes under his breath at stoplights. Renewed commitment, trust-based leadership, cultural alignment across teams. Lauren adjusted her earrings in the mirror. Remember to pause after the line about measurable transformation. Let people clap. Emily looked out the window. I looked at Michael's profile and felt a sadness I could not name. He seemed so desperate to be admired. Not loved. Admired. There is a difference. Love lets you rest. Admiration makes you keep performing. When we reached the hotel, the entrance glittered with lights. Valets moved quickly. Women in evening gowns stepped from cars. Men in dark suits laughed too loudly. A photographer's flash burst white against the polished doors. Lauren immediately touched Michael's arm. "Smile," she whispered. He did. The three of them moved forward, and I followed half a step behind. Inside, the ballroom lobby was even grander than I expected. Tall arrangements of white flowers stood on marble tables. A string quartet played near the staircase. Screens displayed the Halberg Systems logo beside words like Integrity, Innovation, People Trust. I almost stopped at the word trust. Lauren noticed and lightly gripped my elbow. "This way, Ethan." Her fingers were gentle, but the message was not. "Stay with us. Do not wander. Do not become a problem." Several people greeted Michael warmly. Some shook his hand. Some congratulated him. A man I recognized from a magazine article slapped his shoulder and said, "Big night for you, Pierce." Several people greeted Michael warmly. Some shook his hand. Some congratulated him. A man I recognized from a magazine article slapped his shoulder and said, "Big night for you, Pierce." Michael smiled. "We'll see." Nobody asked me anything. Not at first. I stood beside Lauren while she introduced herself to executives' spouses and board members. Each time she said, "This is Michael's mother, Ethan." No one was rude. That would have been easier to bear. They were polite in the distant way people are polite to furniture in a room they are trying to cross. Then a woman with kind eyes approached us. "Mrs. Pierce." I turned. She was about 45, with dark hair pulled back neatly and a calm intelligence in her face. "I'm Rachel Morgan," she said. Internal communications. I recognized the name from Emily's stories, though Emily had never told me enough to make me understand why it mattered. "It's nice to meet you," I said. Rachel took both my hands in hers. "I'm very glad you came." The sincerity in her voice startled me. Before I could respond, Lauren stepped slightly forward. "Rachel, hello. We're excited for tonight. Michael's been preparing for weeks." Rachel glanced at Lauren, then back at me. "I'm sure he has." There was something in her tone I could not read. Emily moved closer to me. Rachel squeezed my hands once before letting go. "I hope we get a chance to speak later." Michael had seen the exchange and now looked uneasy. "You know my mother?" he asked Rachel. Rachel smiled professionally. "Not yet, not yet." The words hung there. Michael's jaw tightened, but before he could say anything, another executive called his name. Lauren guided him away, and I was pulled with them into the ballroom. Our table was not at the front. It was not at the very back either, but it was far enough from the stage that I understood my place in Michael's version of the evening. Close enough to be seen as family, not close enough to be noticed. Emily sat beside me. Lauren sat on Michael's other side. The table filled with 2 board members, 1 investor, and their spouses. Conversations circled around funding rounds, expansion plans, vacation homes, and college admissions. I smiled when appropriate. I answered when spoken to. Mostly, I listened. Listening had always been my strongest skill. Halfway through the salad course, one of the investors' wives asked me, "And what do you do, Ethan?" Before I could answer, Lauren laughed softly. "Oh, Ethan is retired. She enjoys a quiet life now." A quiet life. I placed my fork down. "I worked for nearly 30 years in employee administration," I said. The woman looked interested. "Oh, that must have been demanding." "It was," I said. "People bring their whole lives to work whether companies make room for them or not." Emily smiled into her water glass. Michael went still. The investor's wife leaned forward. "That's beautifully said." Lauren's smile froze. Michael cleared his throat. "Mom always had a way with sayings." Sayings, not experience, not wisdom, sayings. A little later, as dessert was being served, I excused myself to the restroom. When I returned through the side hallway, I heard voices near a curtained alcove. I would not have stopped except one of them was Michael's. "She's already starting," Lauren whispered. "She's fine," Michael said, though he sounded strained. "She told Brenda Maxwell that people bring their whole lives to work." "Ethan, this is exactly what I meant. She didn't do anything wrong." "No, but she doesn't understand these rooms. She thinks every conversation needs to become a life lesson." A silence. Then Lauren said, lower, "Tonight is important for you, for us. You cannot let your mother turn this into one of her kitchen table wisdom moments." My hand tightened around my purse strap. Michael did not answer quickly enough. Then he said, "I know." Lauren continued, "She has never contributed to this company. She doesn't know what it took for you to get here. She should be proud to sit quietly and watch." Sit quietly, watch. My chest felt hollow. Then Michael spoke again, softer, but worse. "After tonight, things will change. Daniel is finally seeing me as more than a people manager. If this goes well, I could be in line for COO. I can't have Mom making this about herself. Making this about myself." I stood in the hallway, invisible again, while my own son protected a spotlight he knew was not fully his. I wanted to step out. I wanted to say, "Michael, I heard you." I wanted to ask him when my presence had become a threat to his success. But before I could move, another voice came from behind me. Grandma Emily stood a few feet away, her face pale. She had heard it too. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she crossed the hallway and took my hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I looked at the curtain hiding Michael and Lauren. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry in that hallway. "No," I said quietly. "Don't be sorry for hearing the truth." Emily's fingers trembled around mine. "We don't have to go back in," she said. I looked toward the ballroom doors. Music drifted through them. Applause rose suddenly from inside, bright and distant. For years, I had left rooms emotionally before anyone could ask me to. I had swallowed words, softened pain, made excuses, and protected Michael from the consequences of his own disrespect because I loved him. But love is not the same as disappearance. I straightened my shoulders. "Yes," I said. "We do." Emily looked at me. I wiped beneath one eye, careful not to smear my makeup. "Your grandfather used to say, 'Dignity is not proven when people honor you,'" I whispered. "It is proven when they don't." Then I walked back into that ballroom with my granddaughter beside me, unaware that Daniel Brooks was already standing backstage, holding a folder full of my words. And the night that Michael feared I might ruin was about to become the night his silence ruined itself. When Emily and I returned to the ballroom, Michael was already seated again. He looked up as we approached, and for one brief second, I wondered if he knew I had heard him. There was something uneasy in his eyes, something guarded. But Lauren leaned close and whispered something to him, and his face settled back into the polished expression he wore for important rooms. I sat down quietly. Emily stayed close beside me. The lights dimmed a few minutes later, and the chatter softened into expectant silence. On stage, a large screen glowed with the Hallberg Systems logo. Music swelled through the ballroom, elegant and triumphant, the kind of music that makes people believe they are about to witness something meaningful. Daniel Brooks walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate. He did not rush to speak. He stood at the podium and looked across the room as if he were not seeing a crowd, but individual people. That impressed me. Most powerful people look over others. Daniel looked at them. "Good evening," he began. "Tonight, we are here to celebrate growth. But growth alone is not success." The room quieted further. Companies can grow in revenue and shrink in character. They can expand in size and collapse in trust. They can become known in the marketplace and still become unfamiliar to the people who work inside them. I felt Emily's hand find mine beneath the table. Michael sat very still. Daniel continued. This year, Hallberg Systems faced a difficult truth. We were moving fast. We were winning contracts. We were impressing investors. But many of our own people felt unseen. Around the ballroom, some executives shifted in their chairs. David Carter, the CFO, looked uncomfortable. Lauren kept her smile fixed, but her eyes moved toward Michael. Daniel's voice remained calm. A company cannot call itself healthy simply because its numbers are strong. Numbers tell us what happened. People tell us what it cost. A quiet murmur moved through the room. I lowered my eyes. That sentence could have come from my own kitchen table. The first award of the evening went to a product team that had redesigned a hospital scheduling platform under intense pressure. Then came recognition for sales growth, client service innovation, and operational excellence. Each recipient walked on stage to applause, shook Daniel's hand, and posed for photographs. Michael clapped at the right times. Lauren whispered reminders into his ear. Emily barely touched her dessert. I tried to focus on the awards, but my heart would not settle. On the screen behind Daniel, between segments, short employee videos played. People spoke about teamwork, resilience, and trust. At first, they sounded like ordinary corporate clips. Then a woman appeared on the screen. She looked to be in her 40s, with tired eyes and a sincere smile. "I was ready to leave," she said. "I had already updated my resume." Then my manager started asking different questions. Not just what's the status, but what are we not seeing? That changed everything. The next clip showed a young man sitting in what looked like a break room. For the first time, he said someone thanked me for work. I thought nobody noticed. Another employee appeared. Quiet respect rules gave us language for things we had felt but didn't know how to say. My breath caught. Quiet respect rules. The words appeared on the screen in clean white letters. Michael's head turned slightly toward Emily. Emily did not look at him. Lauren's smile disappeared. The ballroom seemed to lean forward. Daniel returned to the podium. "Some of you have heard that phrase in recent weeks," he said. "Quiet respect rules. It has appeared on team boards, in manager meetings, in internal messages, and in conversations that our leadership did not script." A soft ripple of laughter passed through the room. Daniel smiled faintly. And perhaps that is why it worked. The screen changed again. This time, words appeared one by one. People don't stay where they are paid. They stay where they are valued. My body went cold. Not because I was ashamed, because I recognized the sentence like one recognizes a child's voice in a crowd. Then another line appeared. Respect once can be performance. Respect repeated becomes safety. Then another. Ask the people nobody usually asks. Then another. When a company becomes too big for kindness, It has become too big for trust. The room was silent now. I could not move. Those were my words, my plain kitchen table words. Words I had spoken while serving meatloaf, while peeling apples, while trying to be useful to people who had laughed at me. Now they were glowing on a screen in a ballroom filled with executives. Michael's face had gone pale. Lauren leaned toward him and whispered sharply, "What is this?" He did not answer. Daniel stepped away from the podium and held a folder in one hand. For the past several weeks, he said our leadership team has been studying a cultural shift inside Halberg. We wanted to understand why certain teams were beginning to rebuild trust faster than others. We wanted to know why some managers were suddenly listening differently. Why recognition became more specific. Why employees who had been quiet began speaking. He paused. The answer was not a consultant. A few people laughed softly. It was not an executive initiative. The laughter faded. It was not born in this ballroom, or in our boardroom, or inside any formal strategy session. Michael looked down at the table. My heart began to pound so hard I could hear it. Daniel opened the folder. It began with a set of notes typed by one of our interns, Emily Pierce. Every head at our table turned toward Emily. Her hand tightened around mine. Daniel looked in our direction, but not directly at her yet. Emily did something simple and courageous. She listened. She wrote down wisdom that many of us in leadership had forgotten how to hear. And when she shared it, our employees recognized the truth in it immediately. Applause began scattered at first, then warmer. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Michael clapped too, but slowly, mechanically, like a man trying to survive his own exposure. Daniel lifted his hand gently, and the room quieted again. But tonight is not only about the person who wrote the notes down. It is about the person who lived long enough, listened deeply enough, and cared consistently enough to speak those words in the first place. I stopped breathing. Lauren's eyes moved to me. For the first time that evening, she looked afraid. Daniel continued, "This company spent a great deal of money trying to understand culture. We hired experts. We collected data. We built frameworks. And yet some of the clearest wisdom we received came from a woman with no title at Halberg Systems." My vision blurred. "No title," Daniel said, "but extraordinary understanding." The screen changed again. A photograph appeared. Not of me. Not yet. It was a photograph of the first printed Quiet Respect Rules page taped beside a coffee machine. The paper was wrinkled at one corner. Someone had underlined the words "valued and trust." Daniel said, "This was the first copy we found." Then the screen showed another photo, a meeting room board with one of my sentences written in marker. Then another, an employee recognition wall. Then another, a screenshot of a message someone had written, "Whoever said this saved my team from losing another person." The applause started again, but softly this time, almost reverently. I felt Emily crying beside me. Michael whispered, "Emily." She did not respond. Daniel looked down at the folder once more. "I want to read something," he said. When asked where her wisdom came from, this woman said, "It came from paying attention when other people were hurting." A small sound escaped my throat. That was my text to Emily. Daniel looked directly toward our table now. The ballroom followed his gaze. Hundreds of faces turned. Michael's shoulders stiffened. Lauren sat frozen. And I, Ethan Pierce, who had spent most of my life believing a mother's work was supposed to be invisible, suddenly felt the light moving toward me. Daniel closed the folder. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady and clear. "Tonight, before we celebrate any executive strategy, I believe we must honor the woman whose words reminded us what leadership is supposed to protect." The spotlight shifted. Not fully yet. just enough for me to feel its warmth on the edge of my blue dress. Daniel looked at me with a gentleness that made my eyes burn. "Mrs. Ethan Pierce," he said, "would you please stand?" For a moment, I could not. Not because I was weak, because every year of being dismissed seemed to rise inside me at once. Emily stood first, still holding my hand. Then slowly, with the entire ballroom watching, I stood beside her. And the applause that followed was not polite. It was not small. It was the sound of people recognizing someone who had been present all along. For a few seconds after Daniel Brooks called my name, I could not hear the applause as sound. I felt it instead. It moved through the ballroom like warmth. After a long winter touching places inside me, I had trained myself not to expose. I had been clapped for before in small ways. Church bake sales, volunteer dinners, Emily's school events when she was little. But this was different. This was not polite appreciation for bringing a casserole or helping set up chairs. This was recognition. And recognition, when you have lived without it for a long time, can feel almost frightening. Emily stood beside me, still holding my hand. Her fingers were trembling. I looked at her first, not at Daniel, not at Michael, not at the hundreds of faces turned in my direction. "You did this," I whispered. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I listened. That answer nearly broke me. Because that was all I had ever wanted from my family. Not praise, not money, not a stage. Just for someone to listen as if my years had taught me something worth hearing. Daniel waited at the podium until the applause softened. Then he spoke again, his voice carrying gently across the ballroom. "Mrs. Pierce, I know this is unexpected. We will not ask you to give a speech unless you wish to. But I would like this room to understand why we are standing." My knees felt weak. Michael remained seated, his face pale and unreadable. Lauren stared at the tablecloth as if it contained instructions for escape. One of the board members at our table looked from me to Michael, beginning to understand that something more complicated than a simple tribute was unfolding. Daniel turned slightly toward the screen. Several months ago, he said Halberg Systems was facing what many companies call a retention problem. That is the safe phrase. It sounds technical. It allows leaders to discuss people as numbers leaving a spreadsheet. The room was silent now. But what we truly had was a trust problem. Employees were tired of being surveyed, but not heard. Managers were rewarded for outcomes without being taught responsibility for the human cost of those outcomes. And some of us at the top were too focused on speed to notice the ground cracking beneath us. David Carter shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Daniel continued. Then something unusual happened. A document began circulating inside the company. No branding, no executive sponsor, no formal rollout, just a set of principles that employees began calling quiet respect rules. The screen showed the title again. Quiet Respect Rules. This time beneath it, another line appeared. Compiled by Emily Pierce from the words of Ethan Pierce. A sharp breath came from Michael. Lauren's head lifted. My name was there, not hidden, not softened, not replaced by corporate language. My name. Daniel looked toward Emily. Emily, would you please stand as well? Emily stiffened, then rose fully beside me. The applause returned smaller, but deeply sincere. Some people at nearby tables turned to smile at her. She wiped her cheeks, quickly embarrassed, but she did not sit down. Daniel said Emily did not invent these principles. She honored them, and that distinction matters. He opened the folder again. We traced the language back through team messages, manager notes, printed pages, and interviews. Over and over, employees told us that these words helped them say what they had been feeling for a long time. And when we asked where the words came from, the answer led back not to a department, not to a consultant, and not to an executive office. His eyes moved briefly toward Michael. not cruelly, but clearly. It led back to family conversations, kitchen table wisdom, the kind of leadership education that often happens before anyone has a title. I felt my throat tighten. Daniel read from the folder. People don't stay where they are paid. They stay where they are valued. He looked up. That sentence has now been quoted in more than 40 team meetings. A murmur moved through the room. He read another. When people stop believing leaders care about them, they begin protecting themselves from the company, instead of protecting the company with you. He paused. That sentence was shared by a manager who realized his team had stopped warning him about problems because they no longer trusted him to respond without blame. I remembered saying those words in my kitchen while Michael pushed away his plate. Daniel turned a page. Trust is rebuilt in small moments when no one is watching. He looked across the ballroom. That sentence changed the way our support department begins weekly meetings. Instead of starting with errors, they now begin by naming what each person held together. He looked across the ballroom. That sentence changed the way our support department begins weekly meetings. Instead of starting with errors, they now begin by naming what each person held together. Someone in the audience began clapping softly. Others followed. I pressed my free hand against my chest. Because all I could think was, they heard me. Strangers heard me when my own family did not. Daniel let the applause fade again. Now, he said, I want to be honest about something. It would be easy for leadership to absorb these words, polish them, place them in a framework, and pretend they came from us. Michael's face tightened. Daniel's voice became quieter. But culture, built on stolen credit, is not culture. It is performance. The sentence struck the ballroom like a bell. Lauren closed her eyes. Emily's hand squeezed mine. Daniel continued. If we are going to speak about respect tonight, then we must begin by practicing it. We must give credit where credit is due. He stepped away from the podium. Mrs. Pierce, the employees of Halberg Systems owe you our gratitude, not because you created a program, not because you sought influence, but because you lived with enough attention to people's pain that your words carried truth. I could no longer stop the tears. Daniel gestured gently toward the aisle. If you are willing, I would be honored to shake your hand. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Emily leaned close. I'll walk with you. I nodded, though I was not sure my legs would obey. As we stepped from our table, people began standing. First one table, then another, then another. By the time I reached the aisle, much of the ballroom was on its feet. I saw employees with tears in their eyes, managers clapping with solemn faces, executives looking humbled, some uncomfortable, some moved. I saw Rachel Morgan standing near the stage, her hand pressed to her heart. And then I saw Michael. He had not stood, not at first. He sat frozen, as if his body had forgotten the rules of public respect. Lauren whispered something harshly to him. Then slowly, too slowly, Michael rose. Our eyes met. I saw shame there. But beneath it, I saw fear. Fear that the world was discovering something he had spent years trying to hide, that the mother he had outgrown was still taller than him in the ways that mattered. I walked past him without stopping, not out of cruelty, because that moment was not his to manage. When I reached the stage, Daniel came down the steps instead of making me climb them alone. That small act told me more about him than any speech could have. He took my hand in both of his. Mrs. Pierce, he said softly so only those near the front could hear. Thank you for reminding us what leadership is for. I looked up at him through tears. I only said what life taught me. He smiled. That is usually the wisdom most worth hearing. Then he turned back to the audience, still holding my hand respectfully. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please join me in honoring Ethan Pierce." The applause rose again. This time, I let myself hear it. Not as proof that I mattered, because somewhere deep down, I think I had always known I did, but as proof that being ignored does not make a person empty. Being dismissed does not make wisdom disappear. And sometimes, the truth your family laughs at in a kitchen can one day stand under bright lights and ask everyone else to rise. Daniel did not let the applause become entertainment. That was what I noticed first. Some leaders would have turned the moment into a spectacle. They would have pulled me onto the stage, handed me a microphone, asked me to smile for cameras, and used my tears as proof that their company had a heart. Daniel did not do that. He kept my hand in his only long enough to steady me. Then he leaned closer and said, "You may return to your seat whenever you're ready." That small kindness almost made me cry harder. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. He smiled gently. "Then don't say anything yet. Being honored does not require you to perform." I had spent so many years performing calm that I nearly forgot what it felt like to be allowed silence. Emily walked me back to our table. People kept standing as I passed. Some reached out to touch my arm. A few whispered, "Thank you." One woman I had never seen before pressed her hand over her heart and mouthed, "You helped us." Me, a retired woman who still kept coupons in a drawer. A mother who had been told to sit quietly. A grandmother who thought her words had disappeared into family walls. When I sat down, Michael did not look at me. Lauren did, but only for a second. Her face had lost all its polish. Without the careful smile, she looked younger and more frightened, as if someone had removed the mask she used to survive rooms like this. Emily remained standing. Daniel noticed. "Emily," he said from the podium, "would you be willing to share how these notes began?" Emily froze. I squeezed her hand. "Only if you want to." She swallowed, then nodded. A staff member brought a microphone to our table. Emily took it with both hands. Her voice trembled when she began, but it did not break. It started because my grandmother kept saying things my family didn't know how to hear. The ballroom went completely still. Michael closed his eyes. Emily continued. She would say them at dinner, in the car, on the phone. Things about respect, listening, dignity, and how people know when leadership only pretends to care. I was an intern, and I kept seeing how unhappy people were at work. Then I realized Grandma had been explaining it all along. She looked at me. So I wrote her words down. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she kept speaking. I didn't share them because I wanted attention. I shared them because people were hurting, and her words made sense of that hurt. I should have put her name on them from the beginning. I was afraid, but I'm not afraid anymore. The applause that followed was softer than before, but deeper. It felt less like celebration and more like respect. Daniel nodded toward her. "Thank you, Emily. That was courage." Then he turned back to the room. "Tonight, we are not only honoring wisdom," he said. "We are also honoring the act of listening." Many organizations fail not because no one knows the truth, but because the truth is spoken by someone leaders have decided is too junior, too quiet, too old, too ordinary, or too inconvenient to matter. Those words moved through me like a hand pressing gently against an old wound. Too old, too ordinary, too inconvenient. I had been all three in my family. Daniel continued. Quiet respect rules reached our employees because it did not sound like a campaign. It sounded like someone had finally told the truth without trying to sell anything. The screen changed again. This time, photos of employees appeared beside short testimonies. A support analyst named Dana spoke first in a recorded clip. I was planning to resign. I had already accepted that nobody noticed the emotional weight of our work. Then my manager began asking of our work. Then my manager began asking what we were holding together, not just what we had failed to finish. That came from quiet respect rules. It made me stay long enough to believe change might be real in what we were holding together, not just what we had failed to finish. That came from quiet respect rules. It made me stay long enough to believe change might be real. Then Marcus appeared. I used to think respect at work meant nobody yelled at you. Now I know it means people don't let your effort disappear. Then Priya, the rule that changed me was, ask the people. Nobody usually asks. I had been waiting 2 years for someone to ask what I knew. My hand shook beneath the table. These were not abstract employees anymore. They had faces, voices, lives. They were people who had carried burdens silently just as I had. Daniel let the last clip fade before speaking again. Mrs. Pierce never met these employees before tonight. Yet her wisdom reached them because truth travels through whoever is brave enough to carry it. He looked toward Emily again. And because Emily carried it, teams began to change. This time, Michael finally looked at his daughter. His face was strained, but something had cracked in him. I could see it. Pride was still there, but beneath it was recognition. Not the public kind, the painful private kind. Daniel's tone shifted slightly. Now I need to address something difficult. The air changed. Every executive in the room seemed to straighten. Daniel did not look at Michael directly at first. That made it worse somehow. When an idea begins to produce results, people with power are often tempted to claim ownership. Sometimes that happens intentionally. Sometimes it happens through silence. A leader may not lie outright. He may simply fail to correct the room when praise lands in the wrong place. Michael's face flushed. Lauren's hand moved toward his arm, but he pulled slightly away. Daniel continued. Let me be clear. Many people at Halberg have worked hard to improve this company. Many leaders have contributed effort, time, and resources, but effort does not erase origin, and authority does not create ownership over wisdom it once ignored. There it was. Not an accusation shouted. A truth laid gently on the table where no one could avoid seeing it. Michael stood suddenly. The movement startled everyone at our table. Daniel, he said, voice tight. The ballroom turned toward him. Daniel looked at him calmly. Yes, Michael. For a moment, I thought my son might defend himself. I saw it pass across his face, the instinct to explain, to reframe, to protect his image. I knew that look. I had watched him use it at family dinners whenever guilt came too close. But then his eyes found mine. I did not glare at him. I did not shake my head. I did not ask anything of him. I simply looked at my son. And maybe for the first time in years, he saw not an old woman embarrassing him, but the mother he had been erasing one small dismissal at a time. His shoulders lowered. He swallowed hard. I need to say something, he said. Daniel nodded once. Go ahead. A staff member brought him a microphone. Michael took it, but his hand was not steady. He looked first at Daniel, then at the room, then finally at me. My mother said many of these things before anyone at Halberg repeated them, he said. And I didn't listen. The room remained silent. Michael's voice grew rougher. I dismissed them. I called them old-fashioned. I treated them like sentimental advice because they came from my mother and not from a consultant or an executive report. Lauren looked down at her lap. Emily covered her mouth. Michael continued. When the company began improving, I allowed people to believe more of the credit belonged to me than it did. I told myself the ideas had become part of a larger strategy. But the truth is, the heart of it came from her. His eyes filled. "I am sorry, Mom." The microphone caught the words clearly. "Not Ethan, not my mother for the room. Mom." For a second, I was no longer in a ballroom. I was standing in a school hallway with a little boy holding a broken science project. I was sitting beside a hospital bed after Robert died while Michael cried into my shoulder. I was every version of myself that had loved him before he learned to be ashamed of needing me. I did not stand. I could not. But I nodded, just once. Michael's face broke. Daniel let the silence breathe. Then he said, "That acknowledgement matters. What comes after it will matter more." It was not forgiveness handed cheaply. It was responsibility given publicly. And somehow, that felt right. The evening moved on, but nothing returned to normal. It could not. The truth had entered the room, and truth once seated among us refused to leave quietly. For the rest of the night, employees came to our table. They did not come to flatter me. They came to tell me stories. One woman told me she had stopped blaming herself for being tired. A young man said my words helped him apologize to his team. A manager admitted she had confused fear with respect until quiet respect rules forced her to look honestly at herself. I listened to each one, because listening was where all of this had begun. Near the end of the gala, Daniel approached me again. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, "this company has built many systems, but tonight reminded us that systems without humanity become machinery. I hope you'll allow us to continue learning from you." I looked at him, overwhelmed. "I'm not sure what I have to offer." Rachel Morgan, standing beside him, smiled. "With respect," she said, "that may be the only thing about tonight you're wrong about." For the first time that evening, I laughed through my tears. And across the table, Michael heard it. Not the laugh of a woman mocking him. The laugh of a mother finally breathing after years of holding herself small. Michael did not return to his seat as the same man who had stood up. That was clear to everyone at our table. Before his apology, he had looked like an executive caught in an uncomfortable moment. Afterward, he looked like a son who had finally realized his mother was not a background detail in his success story. His face was pale. His eyes were red. The microphone had been taken away, but the words he had spoken seemed to remain around him. "I am sorry, Mom." For years, I had imagined hearing those words. Not in a bitter way. Not every day. But sometimes, after a family dinner where he corrected me too quickly, or after Lauren laughed at something I said, or after Michael made me feel like a woman whose usefulness had expired, I would drive home and wonder what it would feel like if he simply called and said, "Mom, I shouldn't have spoken to you that way." But apologies are strange things. When you finally receive one, it does not erase the wound all at once. It only opens the door to a room where healing may begin if both people are brave enough to enter. Daniel Brooks returned to the podium after Michael sat down. His voice was calm, but the room had changed. People were no longer watching a gala. They were witnessing a lesson in real time. "I want to thank Michael Pierce for his honesty," Daniel said. "Public accountability is not easy. But leadership without accountability is only authority." Michael lowered his head. Daniel continued, "Let me also be clear. This company does not build a healthier culture by humiliating people when they fail. We build it by telling the truth, repairing harm, and changing behavior." That sentence mattered, because I did not want my son destroyed. I wanted him awakened. There is a difference, though. Anger often confuses the two. Daniel looked around the ballroom. Michael will continue in his role, but his next responsibility will be different. He will not present himself as the architect of quiet respect rules. Instead, he will lead a company-wide listening initiative under Rachel Morgan's guidance, beginning with the departments where trust was most damaged. A murmur moved through the room. Michael looked up sharply. Daniel met his eyes. Not a performance, not a survey. Listening. The kind Mrs. Pierce has been teaching us tonight. For the first time, I saw Michael receive correction without defending himself. He nodded. Only once, but it was real. Daniel went on. And before any future culture framework is presented to this organization, we will document its true origins. Ideas do not become less professional when they come from lived wisdom. In fact, sometimes that is what makes them worth following. The applause was measured, thoughtful, not the thunder that had followed my recognition. This was different. This was the sound people make when they are deciding whether to believe a promise. After Daniel stepped away, dinner resumed, though no one at our table had much appetite. Lauren sat stiffly, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Emily kept glancing between her parents and me, as if she feared the evening might shatter again. Michael stared at the water glass in front of him. Finally, one of the board members cleared his throat. Mrs. Pierce, he said carefully, I hope you understand how deeply your words have affected this company. I smiled faintly. I'm beginning to. His wife leaned toward me. You must have been an extraordinary manager. I shook my head. I was never a manager in the way people usually mean it. But people came to you? Yes. Then maybe you were exactly the kind of manager most places need. That sentence settled over me softly. For so much of my life, I had let job titles define the size of my contribution. I had told myself I was just admin because that was what the world called it. But I had been the person people trusted when policies failed them. I had held stories no spreadsheet could carry. I had built quiet safety in corners nobody measured. Maybe that counted. Maybe it always had. Across the table, Michael looked at me. This time, he did not look away. Mom, he said quietly. Lauren tensed. I looked at him. Yes, I don't know how to fix this tonight. I appreciated that sentence more than another polished apology. You can't, I said. He swallowed. I continued. Some things are not fixed by words said under pressure. His eyes lowered. I know. No, I said gently. I don't think you do yet, but maybe you're ready to learn. That hurt him. I could see it. But he did not argue. Emily's eyes filled again. Lauren spoke for the first time in several minutes. Her voice was thin. Ethan, I'm sorry too. I turned to her. She seemed smaller than usual. Not humbled enough to be transformed, perhaps, but shaken enough to be honest for a moment. I judged you, she said. I thought because your life looked simple, your ideas must be simple. I waited. She glanced toward the stage, then back at me. That was wrong. There were more things she could have said. She could have apologized for every little cut, every cold compliment, every time she made me feel like a guest in my son's life. But this was all she could manage that night. I accepted it for what it was, a beginning, not a completion. Lauren, I said simple is not the same as shallow. Her eyes dropped. I know. Do you? She looked back up. I did not say it cruelly. I needed to know. After a moment, she whispered, I'm learning. That was enough for the moment. The rest of the gala unfolded around us, but my family sat inside a different kind of ceremony. The painful, private ceremony of seeing ourselves clearly. Awards were given. Photographs were taken. Daniel shook hands with donors, employees, executives, and board members. But again and again, people came to me. A young manager told me he had apologized to his team for interrupting them. A woman from customer success told me she had decided not to quit until she saw whether the change was real. An older employee, probably close to my own age, held my hand and said, "Thank you for proving wisdom doesn't retire." That one made me laugh and cry at the same time. Near the end of the evening, Daniel invited me to a quieter room off the ballroom, along with Rachel, Emily, Michael, and Lauren. The room had soft lighting, navy walls, and tall windows overlooking the city. The noise of the gala faded behind the closed door. Daniel did not sit behind the desk. He sat in a chair across from me. That mattered too. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, "I meant what I said earlier. I would like Halberg to continue learning from you. Not tonight, not as a decision made under Emoto Night, not as a decision made under Emo Tie-In. But when you are ready, I would like to discuss a role. A role, I repeated, honorary culture advisor." Michael looked up. Lauren blinked. Emily smiled through tears. I almost laughed. "Mr. Brooks, I'm retired. Tion. But when you are ready, I would like to discuss a role." "A role," I repeated. "Honorary culture advisor." Michael looked up. Lauren blinked. Emily smiled through tears. I almost laughed. "Mr. Brooks, I'm retired." Daniel smiled. "So I've been told. I don't have a degree in organizational psychology." You have something many people with degrees are still trying to develop. And what is that? Credibility with the human heart. The room went quiet. I looked down at my hands. The same hands Michael had once dismissed without saying so. The same hands that had served meatloaf folded laundry typed old employee files and held the grief of strangers in office break rooms. "I don't want power," I said. "I'm not offering power," Daniel replied. "I'm offering respect and a way for your wisdom to be used without being taken from you." That sentence found the exact place in me that still hurt. I glanced at Michael. His eyes were wet again. For the first time that night, he spoke without trying to control the room. "Mom, he said you should do it if you want to. If you want to. Not because it would look good. Not because it helped him. Not because it served his story. Because I wanted to." I nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." Daniel smiled. "That is all I ask." When we left the room, Michael, all I ask. When we left the room, Michael walked beside me instead of ahead of me. Lauren did not touch my elbow to guide me. Emily stayed close, proud, and exhausted. At the ballroom doors, Michael stopped. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know tonight doesn't make up for years." Walked beside me instead of ahead of me. Lauren did not touch my elbow to guide me. Emily stayed close, proud, and exhausted. At the ballroom doors, Michael stopped. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know tonight doesn't make up for years." "No," I said, "it doesn't." He flinched, but I continued. "But years can change if days begin changing." He looked at me like a man being handed both mercy and responsibility. Then I said the words I had carried all evening. "Respect is not something you borrow from another person's wisdom, Michael. It is something you earn by how you treat people when no one is applauding." He closed his eyes. "I understand." I touched his cheek just once. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "Now you begin." Michael came to my house 3 nights after the gala. He did not call first. I was in the kitchen washing a teacup when headlights crossed my curtains. For a moment, I thought it might be Emily, because she often stopped by without warning when her heart was too full for her parents' house. But when I looked through the window, I saw Michael's silver Mercedes sitting in my driveway. He remained inside the car for nearly 5 minutes. I stood at the sink and watched him. A mother knows when her child is gathering courage. Finally, he stepped out. He was not wearing a suit this time. Just jeans, a gray sweater, and the tired face of a man who had run out of polished explanations. He walked slowly to my porch and rang the doorbell, though he still had a key somewhere in his house from years ago. I opened the door. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hi, Michael." He looked past me into the small hallway, then back at my face. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He entered quietly, as if the house itself deserved an apology. His eyes moved over the familiar things he had stopped noticing years ago. The framed family photographs, the old oak table, Robert's coat still hanging on a peg near the back door, though he had been gone for 8 years. "Would you like tea?" I asked. He gave a small, broken laugh. "You're offering me tea? You came to my house. I assume you need something warm." His face tightened. "Yes," he whispered. "I think I do." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had spoken words he mocked, the same table where Emily had secretly written them down, the same table that now felt less like furniture and more like a witness. For a while, neither of us spoke. The kettle clicked softly. Rain tapped against the window. I placed a mug in front of him, then sat across from him. Michael wrapped both hands around the tea, but did not drink. "I don't know where to start," he said. "Start with the truth." He looked at me then. Not defensively, not impatiently. Like a little boy who had finally stopped pretending he was not lost. "I was ashamed," he said. The words surprised me. Of me, I asked. His eyes filled immediately. "No. Yes. Not exactly." I waited. He took a shaky breath. I was ashamed of where we came from, of how hard everything looked when I was young, of watching you and Dad count bills at the table, of hearing kids at school talk about vacations and new cars while I knew you were stretching groceries until payday. I sat very still. He continued. "I promised myself I would never look small again. I wanted rooms where people respected me before I spoke. I wanted money, status, a title. And when I got those things, I started treating anything that reminded me of the old life like it was something to escape." His voice cracked. "And you reminded me of it." There it was. Not the whole wound, perhaps, but one of its roots. I looked down at my hands. "Michael, I was not your shame. I was the person trying to carry you through it." "I know," he said quickly. "I know that now." But I twisted it. Every time you gave advice, I heard poverty. I heard smallness. I heard the life I was terrified people would connect to me. "That was not my voice you were hearing," I said softly. "That was your fear." He nodded, tears spilling now. "I'm so sorry." I believed him, but belief did not erase memory. "I need you to understand something," I said. "You didn't only dismiss my advice, you dismissed my life." He closed his eyes. "When you said I worked in admin," I continued, "you made 30 years of service sound like a footnote. When Lauren laughed at my stories, you let her. When I sat at your table, I felt like a guest who needed permission to speak." His shoulders shook. "I know." "No," I said, not unkindly. "Listen before you answer. That is the first lesson." He opened his eyes and nodded. So I told him. I told him about driving home from his house with tears in my eyes. About the peach cobbler he barely touched. About the way Lauren's compliments cut because they always carried correction underneath. About hearing him in the hallway at the gala say he could not have me making the night about myself. His face collapsed at that. You heard that? Yes. He covered his mouth with one hand. I am ashamed of that, he said. You should be. The words landed hard, but they were true. For years, I had softened truth for him. That night, I did not. Michael lowered his hand. I don't deserve your forgiveness. The words landed hard, but they were true. For years, I had softened truth for him. That night, I did not. Michael lowered his hand. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about deserving, I said. But reconciliation requires change. He looked at me like he was afraid to move. What do I do? You begin at home, I said. Not at Halberg, not in front of Daniel, not in a leadership meeting. Here, with the people you stopped seeing clearly. He nodded slowly, and with Emily, I added. His face tightened again, this time with pain. She barely talks to me. She should not have had to fight you to defend me. I know. You made her choose between honesty and family peace. He looked down at the table. I thought I was protecting my career. You were protecting your pride. He did not argue. That was how I knew something real was happening. A few minutes later, another car pulled into the driveway. Michael looked up, startled. I was not. Lauren, he asked. I nodded. She called earlier. His eyes widened. You invited her? She asked to come. He looked toward the door, nervous now. Lauren knocked softly. When I opened the door, she stood there holding a small white box from the bakery near my house. Her makeup was minimal, her hair pulled back, and for once, she did not look like she had dressed to prove anything. I brought lemon cake, she said awkwardly. Emily said you like it. I do? She stepped inside and looked toward Michael, then at me. I owe you more than an apology, she said before sitting down. That surprised me. Michael watched her carefully. Lauren placed the bakery box on the counter but did not open it. My mother was very concerned with appearances, she said. When I was young, she corrected everything. Clothes, manners, voice, weight, friends. I learned to survive by looking acceptable before anyone could reject me. Her eyes shone. When I married Michael, I thought success meant never looking ordinary. And you looked comfortable with ordinary things. Your house, your cooking, your stories, your quiet confidence. I think I mistook that for lack of ambition because I didn't understand peace. I did not speak. Lauren swallowed. So I tried to polish you, or hide you, or make you smaller. And that was cruel. Michael looked stunned, as if he had never heard his wife speak from beneath her armor. Lauren turned to him. And you let me. He flinched. I know, he said. No, she whispered. We both did it. We both treated your mother like she was something from the past, instead of someone who built the foundation we stand on. The kitchen was silent, except for the rain. I felt tears rise again, but these were different, not the sharp tears of humiliation. Softer ones, tired ones. I can forgive you, I said. Both of you. But I will not go back to being managed. Lauren nodded quickly. I understand, Michael said. So do I. I will speak when I choose, I said. I will visit when I am wanted, not when I am useful for appearances. And if either of you dismiss me in my own family again, I will leave the room without explaining my worth. Michael cried openly then. Lauren reached for his hand. I let them sit with it, because sometimes mercy is not removing discomfort. Sometimes mercy is allowing people to feel the weight of what they finally understand. Later, Emily arrived too. Michael had texted her and asked if she would come. She hesitated at the doorway until I opened my arms. Then she came straight to me. Michael stood behind her, voice trembling. "Emily, he said you were right. About Grandma. About me. About the credit. About all of it." Emily turned slowly. "I didn't want to be right," she said. "I know. You made me feel like telling the truth was betrayal." Michael wiped his face. "That may be the worst thing I did to you." Emily's chin quivered. "It was." He nodded. "I'm sorry." She did not hug him right away. I was proud of her for that. Forgiveness should not be demanded just because an apology is offered. But after a long moment, she stepped forward and let her father hold her. It was awkward at first, then real. Lauren cried quietly beside them. I stood near the stove, watching 3 people I loved begin the painful work of becoming honest with one another. Robert's photograph sat on the windowsill, smiling that gentle smile of his. For the first time in years, my kitchen did not feel like the place where my wisdom had been dismissed. It felt like the place where my family finally began listening. 2 weeks after the gala, I returned to Hallberg Systems. Not as Michael's mother, not as Emily's grandmother, not as a woman being quietly escorted through a room where she was expected to smile and stay in the background. This time, when I entered the building, Rachel Morgan met me in the lobby with a visitor badge already printed. Ethan Pierce, Honorary Culture Advisor. I held the badge in my hand and stared at it longer than necessary. Rachel smiled. "Too much." "No," I said softly. "Just unfamiliar." She understood. Some people rush you past emotional moments because they are uncomfortable with tears. Rachel did not. She simply stood beside me while I made peace with seeing my name attached to respect in a place where I had never worked. Daniel Brooks joined us a few minutes later. He wore no grand expression, no theatrical warmth, just a steady kindness that had come to feel trustworthy. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, "welcome back." I lifted the badge. "I'm still thinking about whether this is a good idea." "That is why we're beginning small." "Small is usually where honest things begin." He smiled. "Exactly." We rode the elevator to the 6th floor where Rachel had arranged a listening session with 12 employees from different departments. Michael was not there. That had been my condition. Not because I wanted to punish him, because I needed my first day to belong to the people who had carried the rules before leadership touched them. The room was ordinary whiteboard, long table coffee at the back windows overlooking the city. But the people inside did not feel ordinary to me. They stood when I entered, and that nearly undid me. "Please don't," I said, quickly laughing through sudden emotion. "If everyone keeps standing up, I may turn around and go home." That broke the tension. They laughed, and we sat. Rachel began formally explaining that the company wanted to understand how quiet respect rules had affected teams. But after a few minutes, I raised my hand. Rachel stopped. "Yes. May I ask them something?" "Of course." I turned to the employees. "Before we talk about rules, I want to know what made you tired." The room changed. People are used to being asked what they need to improve, what obstacles they face, what processes are broken. But tiredness is more honest. Tiredness tells the truth before professionalism edits it. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dana, the support analyst from the gala video, leaned forward. "I was tired of being blamed for emergencies I didn't create." A man from product said, "I was tired of leaders calling things urgent because they didn't plan well." Another woman said, I was tired of being called quiet when I was really just afraid. I listened. I did not interrupt. I did not fix. I did not turn their pain into a framework. I listened the way people had once listened to me at my old desk, back when titles did not matter as much as whether someone could be trusted with the truth. At the end of the session, I wrote one sentence on the whiteboard. Do not ask people for honesty if you plan to punish them for giving it. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Rachel took a picture of the board. That one, she said, needs to go in the next manager guide. I looked at her sharply. With my name, she promised. That became one of the first changes Daniel made official. Every principle used in Halberg's culture work included its source. Some came from employee listening sessions. Some came from managers who had learned through mistakes. Many came from the original quiet respect rules, but none were folded into executive language without credit. Michael had to present that change at the next leadership meeting. Emily told me later that his voice shook when he said, "We cannot build trust with borrowed wisdom and hidden sources." But he said it, and more importantly, he began living it. He started with Emily. Not with a grand gesture, but with a question. One evening, he knocked on her bedroom door and asked, "Can you tell me what I missed?" She did not answer right away. Then, she let him in. For 2 hours, she told him what it had felt like to be dismissed, corrected, and made responsible for protecting a truth adults should have honored first. Michael listened without explaining. When he tried once, Emily held up her hand and said, "Dad, you're doing it again." He stopped. That may not sound like much, but in my family, it was a miracle. Lauren changed more slowly. She still cared about appearances. That kind of armor does not fall off in a week. But she began catching herself. Once during Sunday dinner, I started telling Emily a story about my old workplace, and Lauren opened her mouth. I saw the old correction rising in her. Then she closed it. A few seconds later, she said, "What happened next?" I nearly smiled, not because she had become perfect, because she had chosen differently. Michael began coming to my house every Thursday evening. At first, he arrived like a man reporting for a moral assignment. He brought flowers. He offered to fix things. He apologized too often, which is its own kind of burden after a while. Finally, one night, while he was tightening a cabinet handle that did not need tightening, I said, "Michael, I do not need you to become my employee." He froze with the screwdriver in his hand. "I'm trying to make up for things," he said. "I know, but guilt is not the same as love." He sat down slowly. "What do I do then? Be here." So he was. Sometimes we talked about Halberg. Sometimes we talked about Robert. Sometimes we ate grilled cheese and tomato soup while watching old movies. Once he brought peach cobbler from a bakery and admitted it was not as good as mine. That pleased me more than it should have. Our relationship did not return to what it had been when he was young. It became something more honest. That is better. A month after the gala, Daniel invited me to speak briefly at a manager training session. I almost refused. The thought of standing in front of managers made my stomach tighten. But Emily reminded me, "Grandma, you're not performing. You're telling the truth." So I went. I stood in front of 60 managers wearing my blue dress again and said, "I am not here to teach you how to be liked. I am here to remind you that every person under your leadership is paying a price to be there. Time away from children, energy taken from aging parents, health strained by stress, dreams postponed to meet deadlines. A paycheck matters, but dignity is what lets people keep looking at themselves in the mirror." No one moved. Then I added, "If you remember that you will lead differently." Afterward, a young manager asked, "What if we already failed our teams?" I answered, "Then tell the truth quickly, repair what you can, change what you must, and do not ask people to trust your words until your behavior has had time to testify." Rachel wrote that one down too. Eventually, quiet respect rules became part of Halberg's onboarding program, not as a glossy slogan, but as a living document. New employees learned its story how an intern listened, how employees carried the truth, how leadership had to humble itself, and how a retired woman with no title reminded a company that culture is not what leaders announce, it is what people experience. Michael remained Chief People Officer, but he was different, not softer in a weak way, stronger in a grounded way. He spent more time with frontline teams. He stopped letting leaders claim success without naming who made it possible. He apologized publicly when listening sessions revealed harm his office had missed. Some people trusted him quickly. Others did not. He learned to accept both. Trust repeated becomes safety. He finally understood that line. As for me, I did not become famous. I did not move into an executive office or spend my final years chasing importance. I still lived in my small brick house. I still watered my ferns. I still clipped coupons sometimes, though Emily teased me for it. I still made meatloaf on rainy Thursdays. But something inside me had changed. Or perhaps something inside me had returned. I no longer waited for my family to decide whether I was worth hearing. I knew. There is a peace that comes when recognition arrives from the outside. But there is a deeper peace when you stop needing recognition to believe your life mattered. One Sunday, months later, our family gathered at my house for dinner. Michael set the table without being asked. Lauren brought salad and did not mention calories. Emily sat beside me reading over a new set of notes for a leadership project she had started at school. During dinner, Michael raised his glass. "To Mom," he said. I looked at him carefully, waiting for performance, but there was none. He continued, "For building more than a family, for teaching me that culture begins at home, and for not letting my disrespect become the final word." The table went quiet. I felt Robert's absence and presence at the same time. I lifted my glass. "To learning," I said. Emily smiled. Lauren wiped one eye. Michael held my gaze. And in that small kitchen, without spotlights, without applause, without a CEO to explain my worth, I felt something even better than vindication. I felt home. Sometimes, the people closest to us are the slowest to recognize our value. They become so familiar with our kindness, our sacrifice, and our wisdom that they mistake it for something ordinary. But ordinary love is often the very foundation everything else stands on. Ethan's story reminds us that a title does not create wisdom. A big office does not create character. A polished speech does not create trust. Real culture, whether in a company or a family, is built in quiet moments, how we listen, how we give credit, how we treat people when nobody is applauding, and whether we honor the people whose work made our success possible. It also teaches us that forgiveness does not mean pretending the hurt never happened. True healing requires truth. Michael's apology mattered, but only because it became the beginning of changed behavior. Lauren's apology mattered, but only because she started choosing respect in small daily moments. And Ethan's grace mattered because she did not shrink herself just to keep everyone comfortable. If you have ever been dismissed by your family, overlooked at work, or made to feel like your experience no longer matters, I hope this story reminds you, your wisdom is not erased because someone refuses to hear it. Your value is not reduced because someone fails to credit you. The truth of a life well lived has a way of rising even after years of silence. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by the people you loved? Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? If you enjoy emotional family stories about dignity, justice, and healing, please like this video and subscribe for more.